This is the MLW Radio Network.
From the territories to Titan Towers to TNA and all points in between, he's seen and done it all. And now he's here to share the real story behind wrestling's biggest moments, controversies, and characters. The MLW Radio Network presents Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. Bruce, what's going on, man? How are you?
I am absolutely excellent, Mr. Thompson, sir.
I got to tell you, man, I had a good time with Wrestlemania 15 last week. Mostly positive feedback on my end. What say you? What was your feedback like?
I think the majority of the feedback was people informing me that Steve said in his book that he left his vest at home and how Gorilla Monsoon looked. But other than that, it was pretty much positive.
Yeah, the rumor and innuendo was incorrect last week. Bruce kind of freestyled that he thought Austin had a vest that was supposed to be made ready. Well, it turns out Austin has said several times that in actuality he was having problems at home, packed his bag in a hurry, and just forgot it and felt like a goof walking to the ring in a T-shirt. But obviously that didn't have any effect on the match. The other thing that we missed in WrestleMania 15, I don't know that we missed it, but we didn't make comment about the somewhat controversial T-shirt that Test wore to the ring that night, where he had a shirt that had a drawing of a gun and it said, "Guns don't kill people, I kill people." Any sort of, in hindsight, that maybe doesn't age that well, but it was a different time. Anything else you want to throw in there?
No, it certainly doesn't age well and would never make it past the censors at the gorilla position today. But no, nothing really else to add on WrestleMania 15. Hey, you know what, Conrad? Last week I was at WrestlePro in New Jersey. Guess who I got to meet?
Who'd you meet?
Finally got to meet face-to-face Sam Roberts. I've talked to Sam. I feel like I know him several times, but I finally got to meet Sam Roberts face-to-face at the WrestlePro event in New Jersey when I was there with Pat Buck. Had a great time, but it was nice to finally I know what he looks like. He knows what I look like, but it's nice when you finally get to shake a guy's hand and say hello.
Absolutely. You should support Not Sam on Twitter. It's at Not Sam. And then be sure to check out the Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. He's a big fan of our show. We're a big fan of his show. Also need to show some love to Ryback. He actually Snapchatted about us this past week, which was pretty cool. Conversations with the Big Guy is also a podcast you want to check out. He has no filter, boys and girls. If you're looking for the dirt, cruise on over and check out his show. And I feel like we should at least go ahead and briefly mention Vince Russo and Disco Inferno and Killing the Town, Lance Storm and Don Callis. They've all been talking about Bruce Prichard. Bruce, you're the belle of the ball right now. I wonder what's got everybody talking.
Well, it's interesting. You know who else was talking about us? Medusa Michelli, who's going to be entering the podcast world. I had a great conversation with her, and her feedback was something along the lines of, she says, "Hey, it's real interesting because everybody I talk to when I'm trying to rebrand myself," this being Medusa speaking, I don't do a Medusa imitation. She says they all start with, "Well, Bruce is doing this." So, hey, thank you guys for talking about us. I greatly appreciate it, and it's all good.
Hey, we're glad to have you on board here. Listen to the show. We're going to get into this week's topic, Roddy Piper. Now, how did we go ahead and arrive at this topic? It's simple. We voted on it on Twitter. And if you're not following us on Twitter, you're missing out. Hit us a follow right now. It's at Prichard Show on Twitter, and the poll is up right now. By the time you're listening to this, you'll see this week's poll. It's going to stay up until the wee hours of Tuesday morning, and then tune in next Friday to not only hear what won, but hear probably 2 or 3 hours worth of that poll topic winner. Bruce is on Twitter and pretty active at Bruce Prichard. I'm also there, and I respond to way more tweets than I probably have any business doing at Hey, it's Conrad. And we'd love to interact with you on, please, forum. I have been a long participant over at Dave Meltzer's WrestlingObserver.com website and their board. But we have decided to go ahead and branch out and start our very own board, and you can check it out right now. It's just a forward right now, but it's WHWRadio.com. That's WHW Radio. Like, what happened when? Radio.com, and there you'll see two separate sections, one for Tony Schiavone's WCW and Jim Crockett Promotions podcast, but then the main event, what you're really here for, something to wrestle with Bruce Prichard. We've got a different thread for every single episode. So if you're tuning in now and maybe you're going to go back and catch up on something in the past, you can go ahead and find out what everybody's talking about right there. So if you'd like to interact with Bruce and I, we're both registered there. We'd love to have your feedback. It's managed and maintained by Leather by Dan. So thanks to Dan for all of his support. He's still making a badass belt for you over at leatherbydan.com. And with all of that said, I feel like it's time.
What time is it?
It's Miller time. You know. There you go. We're getting it.
And it's time to relax.
Let's talk about what happened when the Prichard Show came to St. Louis. We're not there yet. We've got to plug our stuff. Go ahead and check it out, notarib.com. If you were making Father's Day plan to go ahead and check out Money in the Bank, your day just got a little better. Now, I should warn you, VIP is selling at an alarming rate. I can't believe all of you guys want VIP, but Lord bless you for wanting VIP. We can't wait to meet you
at notarib.com. That's right. That's NOTARIB, notarib.com. And did you think for 1 second that we would have the kind of response that we are having in St. Louis, Mr. Thompson?
No, I did not. I can't believe it, but we're nearly sold out of VIP. So if you had planned to come see us and we're putting it off, I encourage you to go buy your tickets right now. 2/3 of these things are already gone at notarib.com. We need to give a shout out to our great friends over at KFNS 590 The Fan in St. Louis. They're a radio partner in the market. They're doing a tremendous job helping drive some awareness, and I want you to know we're coming, and you can make this the best wrestling Father's Day ever. You can come see us right there at the South Broadway Athletic Club. It's on 7th Street, just a couple of miles away from where WWE is holding their Money in the Bank pay-per-view that evening. And go to notarib.com. Tickets are even cheaper than for our Orlando show. We've got early bird prices, but you need to buy them right now. General admission, $25. Hook it up, notarib.com. Tickets are selling fast, and that's not just hyperbole. We're not just saying that to say it. We're shocked and overwhelmed at the response. Thank you, St. Louis. Hook it up, notarib.com. Let's get to what we're really here for, though, Bruce.
And that's BrucePrichard.com? I figured we were in that groove. We were in that mode. It's Friday noon's main event, Conrad, for God's sake.
You know, it's just funny because we're both like, nope, it's a false finish. And I was throwing to the fucking lawyer commercial, and you're throwing to the T-shirt commercial. So do you want to do T-shirts or lawyer first? I say lawyer, and then we'll come around to T-shirts later. What do you think?
Well, so what you're trying to say is that if you have a legal need, no matter what it is, if you have a loved one that has mesothelioma or you have been involved in an accident, you need some help. You just need some legal advice. It's real simple, folks. Visit our friends over at rgt4law.com. Listen to them.
If your life is as much of a wreck as that segue was, we'll be right back.
Have you or a loved one been affected by mesothelioma? You may not have to file a lawsuit to get a recovery. Go to rgt4law.com and fill out the easy form for more information. Robert Taylor, RG Taylor II, PC and Associates, Houston, Texas.
All right, so let's get to what everybody really wants. In an overwhelming majority this week, Roddy Piper has won our poll. And we're going to try to do our best to give you the best show possible here today, but I do need to go ahead and give you a little bit of a heads up here at the start of the show. There's going to be parts of the show that you're going to wish that we went in more detail. We're going to come back to it. For instance, on that would be Wrestlemania 12, the Backlot Brawl. We're going to cover that in great detail when we cover Wrestlemania 12. It's not a matter of will we cover it. It's a matter of when. So we'll discuss it here today, but we're going to go into it in much greater detail on the Wrestlemania 12 show. And a lot of you are probably going to be a little upset with us that we're not talking about, you know, the original Piper's Pit in great detail and how it came to be, and the war to settle the score, and WrestleMania 1, and his boxing match with WrestleMania 2, and WrestleMania 3 with the retirement show. But why won't we be covering all of that, Bruce?
I wasn't there.
He also wasn't there for WrestleMania 8 with a lot of people's favorite match of Roddy's against Bret the Hitman Hart. So I'm just giving you a heads up. We're going to give you a great show. We're going to give you lots of fun stories that you've never heard before because Bruce was great friends with Roddy. So we've still got a lot of cool stuff coming, but you do need to know Bruce wasn't there for a lot of that stuff. So Bruce, kind of catch us up from the beginning. When was the first time you met the Hot Rod?
Well, it wasn't the very first time that I met him, but it was the very first time that I was exposed to Roddy, and it was probably mid-1970s, maybe 73, 75, in that area, when Roddy was coming through the Texas territory, the Dallas territory that Fritz von Erich had, and Red Bastien was the booker at the time. Roddy had come in, and he was blonde, skinny kid, not tremendously great physique by any stretch of the imagination. He wore his little dress to the ring with his blowhard pipes that he had there. And that was kind of the running little joke, I guess, Roddy had with everybody, but I would always refer to his kilt as a skirt or a dress and always get corrected. Yeah, son, you know that it's a kilt there, son. You're real funny. But Roddy was, still unique at the time, and he was a young kid. The very first match I ever remember seeing Roddy Piper in, he wrestled Blackjack Lanza. And Lanza's finish was the claw. Black glove, and he used the claw as a finisher. And Roddy got some real heavy juice on this one day, and it was the second match of the night, which was uncharacteristic, too, that you'd get color in the second match of the evening, but Roddy did. And I even have a picture of Hot Rod coming back from the ring covered in blood. And that was the very first time I saw Roddy. But where he was etched into everyone's memories in Houston was shortly after his debut. We were having an event in the Fondy Recreation Center in downtown Houston. Normally we ran the Sam Houston Coliseum in Houston, but if that got booked for a multi-day event or a big concert, sometimes we would get bumped and we'd have to go to the Fondy Rec, which was a small neighborhood recreation center. They had, mediocre PA system and what have you, and Paul Bosch, being a war veteran, always had to play the national anthem before any event. So Roddy's in the first match. Roddy's standing in the middle of the ring with his opponent staring across from him, and they ask everyone to please stand for the playing of our national anthem. I wasn't the announcer, so they actually said national, not natural anthem. And the music started to play, and then it went out. Then it played a little more, and then went out. The national anthem wasn't being played, and that made Paul Bosch very upset. So Paul went to the ring, and he apologized, and he lambasted everybody in the Fondy Recreation Center for their horrible PA system, and how dare they desecrate the national anthem, Stars and Stripes, Star-Spangled Banner. He puts the microphone down and walks over to Roddy Piper, who's standing in the corner with his bagpipes, and says, "Hey, kid, can you play the national anthem on that thing?" And Piper, being very old school, without hesitation said, "Yes, sir." And Roddy went to the middle of the ring while Paul held the microphone, and Piper played the Star-Spangled Banner on the bagpipes and brought the house down and saved the day. So that was my first, real, experience with the Hot Rod, Roddy Piper.
Well, so there you go. Now, of course, Piper would go on to, make a name for himself in California. He, of course, popped the territory in Portland, was their biggest star there, was always in the hot angles and featured acts in Mid-Atlantic. He winds up in New York. He starts as a heater for Orton and Orndorff, eventually transitioning to being an in-ring performer. It's probably the top heel in the territory in short order, and a lot of that has to do with Piper's Pit. In retrospect, do you think that Piper's Pit gets the credit it deserves?
Yeah, I do. Roddy, hell, I stole everything from Roddy and Piper's Pit. But where I don't think Roddy gets the credit is that Roddy Piper was the first heel color commentator. And he did it in Atlanta in the early 80s alongside Gordon Soley. And the way that he did it was, in my mind, absolutely brilliant. because he didn't wear the kilt. He came out as Roddy Piper and was a straight color guy for a long time. And eventually there were some heel tendencies that came out that Roddy started knocking Bob Armstrong and knocking Georgia, knocking Atlanta and Southerners and so on and so forth, to where he finally went full-fledged heel with Roddy Piper in a program with Bob Armstrong. And then after the program with Armstrong, several others, they eventually turned him babyface because he was just so damn good on the mic when they had Morocco knock Gordon Soley out of his seat and Piper came to his rescue. But that's where Piper doesn't get the credit, because Piper, to me, was the best heel color commentator the business had ever seen.
So let's talk about Piper's Pit a little bit. When you first see that, do you know that Piper is going to be a megastar? Or what's the reaction when you see the way he just kind of bowls over Frankie, smashes, Snuka with the coconut? There's so many iconic things that stick out about those early Piper's Pit segments. And then, of course, it would become a little bit of these in the future would happen, whether it was the Brother Love Show or the Flower Shop or, Beefcake's deal or Paul Bear's deal, on and on and on.
I think that anybody that watched Roddy in the beginning loved it because he was so off the cuff. You never knew what the hell he was going to do. And tradition was thrown out the window. It wasn't the normal interview segment. It wasn't a heel promo. It was a heel cutting promo on other baby faces and putting other heels over. I thought it was just magnificently done on every level. And then, of course, the famous Snuka Piper's Pit with the coconut and everything put him on the map. It made him different.
It certainly did. And it got everybody talking, and it just kind of fueled the fire. And it became a place where all the major angles happened. Hogan, Andre, the Snuka deal. I mean, so much that people would talk about for years and years. And we can't discount the role that Cyndi Lauper played in this whole rock and wrestling connection. Did you ever meet Cyndi or work with her?
I got a good Cyndi Lauper story, too.
Let's hear it.
We were talking about the Sam Houston Coliseum just a second ago. Well, I was anyway. The Sam Houston Coliseum was adjacent to Jones Hall in Houston, and it was a small theater set up. I don't know, it held maybe 2,000 people. I'm not sure what the capacity was. But during the rock and wrestling heyday, Cyndi Lauper had a concert at Jones Hall that we had wrestling. The dressing rooms for the Coliseum backed up to Jones Hall, and there was a common door that was shared between the two. Now, Jones Hall had two sets of dressing rooms. They had dressing rooms on both sides of the stage. However, Cyndi didn't want to use the Jones Hall dressing rooms. Her people wanted to use the dressing rooms that were on the Sam Houston Coliseum side, my side of the building I was renting. And in my eyes, she was the enemy because she was working for that evil New York Empire and the devil incarnate, Vince McMahon. So they come over and kind of tail between their legs, and they're like, oh, well, you guys should probably know each other, both wrestling. She does wrestling stuff too, and you guys got wrestling going on here tonight, and Cyndi would like to use this. And basically I threw her and her people and everybody out of the Coliseum. That was my first and only interaction with Cyndi Lauper. I never met her years after that.
How many people do you think you've thrown out of buildings over the years?
A few.
I figured you were going to say that. So this Cyndi Lauper thing at the time catches a lot of fire. And he even he has an angle where he's physical with her, and he's on with, I think it's McMahon for TNT. And he says something like, if a woman hits me, I hit them back. And it was pretty controversial at the time. Do you remember? I mean, obviously, we're going to paint this with times were different. Dusty hit Baby Doll too, but do you remember there being any sort of uneasiness in the business with a man hitting a woman on TV in the mid '80s like this?
Unfortunately, there wasn't that much.
Yeah,
and however, I will preface. I'll say that if it was a babyface hitting a heel female, that was okay. But if it was a heel that was attacking a babyface, then that was, oh my God, there's something wrong with that. But if the bitch is being a bitch, she deserves to get hit. Just saying. And that was
golly.
Kind of my said, hey, bitch gonna be a bitch. Bitch need to get hit.
Do you realize who you're doing accidentally right there?
What?
That's not even that's not something he's ever been accused of or anything. So let's move along.
No, I'm just doing my Southerner.
That's your go-to Southerner?
Somewhat.
And then
the
first WrestleMania goes down. Lots of controversy surrounding this and the promotion for it because Mr. T was involved, and we're in WrestleMania season right now in 2017, and there's so many people who say that, WrestleMania is not for part-timers. It's not for celebrities. It's for, the guys as a reward for all the hard work they've put in over the years. And I know you weren't there for the first WrestleMania, but Mr. T was, and he was there in the main event. So WrestleMania has kind of always been about mainstream and outsiders and trying to attract as many eyeballs as possible. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, that's what made WrestleMania stand out. As Vince would always say, you grow from the outside in. And I was on the outside of the WrestleMania bubble at the time, but the thought of putting a Hollywood actor in a ring to compete with professional wrestlers was frowned upon by every old timer and every wrestling purist in the world. How dare Vince McMahon put this Hollywood actor in a main event,
right,
against professional wrestlers? So the scuttlebutt on the other side of that coin was, well, if T gets out of hand or the Orndorff and Piper, they're going to have to put him in his place. They're not going to sell for an actor, are they? They thought never in a million years can a professional wrestler sell for a Hollywood actor. So there was a lot of scuttlebutt. There was so much rumor and innuendo and bullshit going on prior to the first WrestleMania with allegedly promoters and old timers in the business making offers to Piper and Orndorff to hurt Mr. T in the match, to embarrass him and beat the shit out of him in the match.
Well, now, let's talk about that. Why are you hitting us with allegedly? Did it happen or did it not happen? It's been 30 years.
I don't know if it did or not, but there was always rumor and scuttlebutt that Vern and Bill Watts and just different guys like that were saying, yeah, well, what if guys just took business into their own hands? They'd always have a place here.
Well, okay, I hear that, but you were boys with Piper. Did he ever tell you that somebody extended such an offer?
He told me about, there was the offer with Vern and Iron Sheik with Hogan back in the time.
Yeah, in 84.
No, I don't know that Roddy and I ever really discussed any specific things. I know that he spoke about what he wanted to do. Roddy did not like Mr. T.
He's been very public about that, and that seemingly never got fixed. They never really saw eye to eye.
Actually, they did. Yeah, they did before he died.
Well, he was shitting on him at WrestleMania 30. I'll tell you that.
But that's where T got inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they kissed and made up that night.
Oh, that's very cool. That's good to hear.
And I'll tell you that whole story when we get there. It was because Roddy told me all about that.
Well, let's just do it now.
Roddy was there. Roddy was there with his son Cole. As we said, Roddy despised Mr. T, felt he had no place in the business, felt that T didn't respect the business, and there was just mutual hatred there. So when T went into the Hall of Fame, all the way up into it, Piper was dead set, and he was very vocal about it. But he told me the story that the night that T was inducted, he had his family there. Mr. T had his son there and had several members of his family.
His whole family was there. Yeah, he had an entourage.
Right, his whole family. But Roddy had his son with him. And as they were leaving, they were in the back, and Mr. T and had done that speech talking about his mama.
Yeah. On Mother's Day, on Father's Day.
And my mother, I pity the fool. Roddy they kind of ran into each other. And he said Mr. T was in front of him, and he said he looked at T with his family and looked over at his son, and he said he felt just kind of small. And he said he went over and grabbed T and pulled him off to the side and said, you know what? I've never liked you. As only Roddy can do. Just explained that he never really cared for him, but he saw him with his family, and he could respect family. And he said he was here with his son. He goes, I see you here with your family, and I just want to bury our past and put it all behind us, and can we make an attempt to be friends? And he said that T was completely cool with that. And they basically hugged and made up right at that point. And Roddy told me, sitting down in Irma's in downtown Houston, just how it was at that moment. It was like a huge weight lifted off of his shoulders.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning, it had been 30 years since the first WrestleMania, so certainly
Hot Rod could hold a grudge.
Well, it certainly seems that way. So let's kind of talk through the Mr. T thing, because at the time, man, he was letting some pretty controversial stuff fly. He said something about T, something along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing, he wears more chains than his ancestors. Wow. That doesn't age well, and lots of heat. And he had, as we've talked about, a lot of animosity towards working with this celebrity, and he's coming in here, trying to take food off my table. And ultimately Piper refuses, according to rumor and innuendo, to lose and take the pinfall, even though he's the guy with all the heat at WrestleMania. And he said in the WWF DVD, quote, I got kids. The way I feed my children is how much money I can make. I wouldn't lay my shoulders down for anybody. Do you remember him always having, and through the rest of the show, I'm sure some of this will come out, but it seems to me as if he always had a chip on his shoulder, and some would say it was due to the way he was ribbed the first time he was at the Garden, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, or the way he grew up, that he grew up kind of rough, but it feels as if he was very difficult to deal with promoters and untrusting of folks, and maybe wasn't always in the right mood to do what's best for business, so to speak. Can you speak to that?
Roddy definitely had a chip on his shoulder. Yeah. He was a smaller guy in a big man's business, but he had the gift of gab, and the son of a bitch drew money. He drew money and he made money. So he couldn't be denied. And I think that sometimes Roddy was put in a position that he felt, well, not sometimes, Roddy always felt he had to defend himself. He didn't trust anybody, and he had very few friends. When I say very few friends, he had a lot of friends, but he had probably few friends that he could really trust and confide in. And from roughly maybe 1990, 1989 on, I'm proud to say that I may have been one of those friends, because we had many, many, many deep conversations over the years. But he walked around with a chip on his shoulder. He felt that he was the only one that was looking out for Roddy Piper was going to be Roddy Piper. Roderick Toombs is the only guy looking out for Roddy Piper. So Yeah, he fought for it, man. He really did. He didn't think anybody else was going to look out for him.
Well, and that seems like a little bit of a theme with him. Of course, we know that Mr. T and Roddy Piper had a boxing match at WrestleMania 2. And then there's the famous WrestleMania 3 match with Adrian Adonis. We're doing some strutting and cutting after the match and giving a haircut. And then we're off. And I'm curious because this is where you kind of come into the story and into the fold with the WWF starting right after WrestleMania 3. So when you get there, Roddy's gone, and he'd be away for 2 years. And he leaves to make the movie They Live and supposedly try his hand at acting in Hollywood. From your perspective, like when your early conversations on the inner circle with Vince McMahon, what's the talk? What's the tone? What's the narrative about Roddy Piper? They're happy he's gone. He was difficult to deal with, and they put a spin on it. He was burnt out. They felt like they had done all they could creatively. It was Roddy's call. They were happy he was gone. It was mutual. What really happened?
Well, again, this is secondhand. I give you what Vince's perspective was to me, was simply that Roddy had an opportunity in Hollywood. Roddy wanted to pursue that. He felt that he had done all that he needed to do in the wrestling business at that time. And Vince was in a position, especially after WrestleMania 3, that he felt, well, you can't do both. You either are going to go and chase your Hollywood dreams, or you're going to stay here and be Roddy Piper. Roddy chose Hollywood. And Vince was, okay, great. Good luck. We'll give you a good send-off. Thank you for everything, and, best of luck to you. And they promoted They Live, and they promoted his different projects over that period. But the feeling that I got was that Roddy really wanted to break away from wrestling, and that Roddy wanted to become an actor. He wanted to go to Hollywood. That's what he wanted. That was a passion of his.
What communication, if any, do you have with him in 87 and 88 before he returns in 89?
Zero.
So he comes back and makes his first appearance back March 19th, 1989. And he does this on a Brother Love Show segment. He has roughly an 11-minute segment with you where he ended up slapping you and hip tossing you. And this is his return after a 2-year absence. So carry us through the thinking. This was in Denver, by the way. And everybody wants to act like everything was sold out every night, hanging from the rafters. They drew 4,000 people in Denver here. Just throwing it out there. Catch me up.
Oh, shit, they must have advertised me then. Normally, if they know I'm not going to be there, it would be much better. But,
Curtain jerker match that night is Blue Blazer taking on Ron Bass, which, that gives you an idea of the time frame we're in. And the main event, it was Andre the Giant and Jake the Snake Roberts. Anyway, catch me up. When you find out that he's wanting to come back or negotiating to come back, when do you hear about that? What's the feeling? How's his reception? And then ultimately, why do they say, oh, got to bring him back on the Brother Love Show?
Well, there's a lot more to it than that. It was WrestleMania season. We're gearing up for WrestleMania 5. Brother Love was, as a character and on TV, I was at one of the hottest points in my career as a character. So Vince really wanted to feature Brother Love on WrestleMania. A lot of different, wanted to do a celebrity guest, wanted to do something outside of the box and feature that character in a different way. We found that Morton Downey Jr., who was a talk show host, syndicated talk show host, Jerry Springer stole a lot of his stuff from Morton Downey Jr., but Morton Downey Jr. was very controversial. He was the hottest thing on TV at the time. We had an in with Morton Downey Jr.'s people, and he was interested in doing the Brother Love Show at WrestleMania. So Vince pitched me, what if we do a Brother Love Show with Morton Downey Jr. as your guest? And I was like, oh, my God, that would be excellent. I'm just beyond, over the moon. I'm happy as shit. I get to do Brother Love with a celebrity and the hottest talk show guy in the world. So time goes by, and I'm thinking about this, and then I get called in. I'll never forget sitting in Vince's office, and he says, "Got some news for you, pal. There will be no Brother Love show at WrestleMania." And my heart sinks.
Because you just thought, everybody would imagine it's over. The show's over. We gotta have that.
Yeah, I'm sick because it's WrestleMania. Here I think I'm going to be in a featured spot with Morton Downey. And he says, there will be no WrestleMania, or there will be no Brother Love at WrestleMania, pal. And he says, instead, I'm going to do Piper's Pit. I'm like, fuck. This guy leaves, goes off to play fucking Hollywood actor, and now you're going to bring him back and give him my spot with Morton Downey. And then he's like, going to have Piper, and you're going to do a Piper's Pit with Morton Downey and Brother Love. And I'm just like, oh my God, my dream. It's doing it with Morton Downey. That was cool for mainstream, but the performer in me, the guy that I stole all my shit from, the guy I patterned a lot of my stuff after, Roddy Piper. Now I'm going to be on Piper's Pit. So I just was ecstatic. He says, how well do you know Hot Rod? I said, I don't. I said, I watched him as a kid, but when I started here, he was gone. Okay, well, I need you to go on out and meet Roddy, and we're going to put you guys on the Denver show coming up. I booked him. And come up with something you'd like to do, and then we can lay all that out. And you go out to Denver and pitch Hot Rod. So I'm like, what the fuck? I don't know him. Now, I've heard all the rumor and innuendo. He's difficult to deal with. He hates when people impersonate him. He doesn't like that at all there. So that's what I do. That's my gig. I do Hot Rod. So I think about it a little bit, and I pitch Vince essentially what we did at WrestleMania 5.
I see.
Where I go out and I impersonate Piper and I do it to his face and I talk about how he really copied me and blah, 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 and all this other shit. And he's like, great. Sell it to Hot Rod. So I get on the plane. I go to Denver. First time I was ever in Denver, too. You ever been to Denver?
I have.
How was your breathing there?
I'll tell you this. When I went to bed, they said, take a couple of bottles of water with you. I'm like, I don't really need that. I don't really do that. They're like, well, just take them just in case. Yeah, it's different. Okay. Well, imagine being in Denver for the first time, being hyped up beyond belief. And then you've got to go in and pitch the guy who you kind of idolize on something that you know he's not going to like because he hates when people impersonate him, and then go out and do it in front of a crowd in Denver where I wasn't, believe that, I know this is hard to believe, but I wasn't in the best shape of my life. And I'm working with Roddy Piper. So we get there. Jack Lanza was the agent that night, and I'll never forget it. I go in and I take my bag in and I put it in the locker room, and Lanza comes in and says, hey, Bruce, no, come here. Vince told me to put you and Roddy, get your own place. It's Miller time.
It is. It's that time. I'm sorry, folks. I'm telling stories here. It just happens. So now I walk out of the locker room with my bag where everybody else is dressing. I go across to a private dressing room, which is the same size as the dressing room that everybody else is in, but it's just me and Roddy. So Roddy shows up. Lanza introduces us. And Roddy likes to touch people. And what I mean by that is he almost pets you when he's talking to you. Kind of like strokes your hair. He rubs your shoulders and rubs your arms. Nice to meet you there, son. Yeah. Oh, so tell me a little bit about your gimmick there. What is it? Well, they tell me I've heard about you. They tell me you do kind of like what I used to do there a little bit. Probably just not as good there. But yeah, tell me about yourself. And so I'm explaining the gimmick and so on and so forth. So what do you want to do tonight there, son? I said, well, Vince wanted me to pitch you on what we'll do tonight is kind of a prelude to see if it works to what we may do at Wrestlemania. And we've secured Morton Downey Jr., and he wants to do a Piper's Pit with me and Morton Downey. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, so what you got in mind there? I said, well, I actually, I kind of do you. That's nice, man. That's real good there, son. So go ahead and show me what it is you do there. And I went through the segment where I would introduce him and bring him out and make fun of They Live, and I would ask questions, but I would answer the questions as Roddy with him in the ring. And he's looking at me, just kind of staring at me. He says, so I'm standing there, right? I'm in the ring with you now, right? Okay. I'm just trying to figure out where we're going to be standing and everything there, son. And you ask me a question, but you answer and you talk like you're doing there, right now. Okay. I'm like, yeah. You know what? Let's just go out there and do it. Let's have some fun, see what happens. And I'm like, oh, fuck, he hates it. So now I have really no idea beyond the opening what I've got, other than I'm going to go out and spar with Roddy Piper in front of a live crowd in Denver. And we go out, I do the opening thing, and out of nowhere, on the third time he was supposed to snatch the microphone from me. And instead of snatching the microphone from me, he ends up slapping the holy living fuck out of me. If there hadn't have been a second rope in the ring, I would have been on the floor. And I caught myself, and I thought, okay, you got a choice here. You can either just tuck your tail between your legs, or you can jump up and spar. And I got right back in his face, and we went on, and we finished the segment and did a little hip toss, and he beats the shit out of me, and we're gone. And I come back, and I'm nervous as shit because I don't know. He caught me by surprise with the slap and blah, 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 and the physicality, and I wasn't sure if he liked it. And he walks in the door and goes, that was great there, son. You're pretty good. And we were cool.
He slapped the fuck out of me, and I didn't make a big deal about it. So he was nice.
No, I did. I got back in his face, which he liked.
Did you hit him back?
No, brother love.
Oh, exactly.
Hey,
I'm just.
Hey, no, Conrad, you don't understand. The character wouldn't hit him back. Now, Bruce, my God, that might have been a different than no. Fuck no.
Isn't it a weird business?
Yeah.
It's a weird
guy
business.
slaps the fuck out of me and almost knocks me out, but
and
we're happy.
And you're hoping he's not mad at you.
He's not hot.
He beats the shit out of you, and you're like, I hope he's not mad. It's great. Yeah.
Exactly, man. I'm a kid. I'm like, Mr. Piper, everything okay?
So before we talk about WrestleMania 5, I want to talk about the Brother Love skit where he gets you down in a compromising position with less clothes than maybe normally we saw on Brother Love. But first, let's talk about They Live. You know, we mentioned that he left for They Live. That movie came out in November of 88, and then he's back with the company by March of 89. Do you think, why do you think the timing of that made so much sense? Obviously, he needs to be out to film it, and then probably wants to rest up and try some other things, and then he wants to work, media to promote the movie. It does turn a profit. They made it for like $3 million. John Carpenter did, and it makes about $13 million at the box office. It's still very well reviewed over at Rotten Tomatoes, getting 84%. Do you think that he expected this movie to be a bigger hit? He thought it would spin off into other stuff. He missed the business. He needed a payday. Why so quickly, November to March, is he right back into wrestling?
Well, it was actually, I mean, he was away for 2 years. He was away from March 87 until.
No, I get that. I mean, as far as the release of the movie, do you think it was maybe a disappointment to him and he thought this isn't drawing huge money? I need to go back?
No, to the contrary. It was a one-off for WrestleMania. And Vince reached out because of the popularity of the movie.
There we go. That's what I wanted.
Yeah. And it was, here Roddy was, and the movie was a big cult classic. It was very well received, but especially for wrestling fans and Piper fans. Man, they loved it. So it was an opportunity. It was really, in Vince's mind, in a way, it was Brother Love with two outsiders.
Mm-hmm.
So I had two celebrities from outside the business in Roddy Piper and Morton Downey.
So talk me through.
But Piper was the bigger name and bigger draw.
In your opinion, even than Morton Downey at that time?
Yes. For that audience, yes.
Oh, for sure, for that audience. Yeah. So let's talk about the movie itself. What did you think of the movie? What did the boys think about it? Is it something that is championed like, hey, man, one of us made it? Is it viewed on the level with Hogan's Rocky appearance? Kind of compare and contrast those two, or just the way the movie was received. What did you think of the movie? Give me some They Live feedback.
For the most part, I think everybody enjoyed it and was happy to see one of the boys make it. The difference between Hogan and Rocky III and Piper and They Live was Hogan was a cameo and Piper was the star of the movie.
Correct.
So Piper actually had some acting chops, and I thought he did really well in it. The overall consensus was simply that, hey, man, one of the boys made it, and people were happy for him. But I think, overall, they didn't really compare Hogan to Piper. If they did, it was Piper to Hogan and No Holds Barred, but with Roddy getting the nod there on the acting chops.
What
had a little bit better material to work with.
Well, do you remember ever talking about the movie with Vince? What did Vince think of They Live?
You know what? I don't know that we ever really had the conversation about They Live. He was happy for Roddy's success because Roddy's success, no matter what, was going to reflect back on the WWF. So that was good for Vince.
So chat me up. Let's hear about this Brother Love segment where Roddy Piper gets you down to your skivvies.
Well, we get together, and we got together that weekend beforehand. I had worked with Morton Downey at this point several times. We had done a lot of the promos for WrestleMania 5, and Morton had come to our studios in Stamford, and me, Vince, and Morton had met. So I had a chance to be around him for an extended period of time and had laid everything out to him ahead of time. Morton Downey was a little bit he was a different cat. He was on top of the world at that time, and he was the darling of that afternoon, talk show genre. So he was pretty cocky. He believed his own press. Very nice man. But I just got that sense that he knew better. No matter what you said to him, it's like, yeah. And then we'll do, yeah. It was, I wasn't sure what the hell I had there. So, Roddy and I talked several times, and Roddy hadn't met Morton. So he was leery, just leery of anybody outside. And I expressed my concerns with Roddy, and especially my concerns of once I left that dynamic, it was just Roddy and Morton out there. I wanted to make sure that Roddy knew what the hell he was dealing with. So we just talked several times that weekend, and then we finally got got with Morton. The three of us finally got together that morning. The morning of WrestleMania was the first time all three of us got together and laid out the segment. It was interesting. Let's just put it that way. Because I had two very strong personalities, both a lot older than me. Well, Roddy's 10 years older than me, and Morton was older than Roddy. And here I am, a 25, 26-year-old kid laying out this segment.
How crazy is that?
To these two guys and stuff. And Vince was clever in how he dealt with Roddy. Vince usually, at least my experience with Vince and Roddy, Vince always used me as a buffer with Roddy. And I dare say that he probably did that for most of his time with Hot Rod, because I don't know, man, it was a love-hate relationship between Vince and Roddy. So I just laid it out, man, and I got a lot of yeahs out of Morton Downey and Roddy just nodding like, yeah, I got this. And then we went out and did the deal. And once I left, the wheels kind of fell off the bus.
So tell everybody what you mean when you say the wheels kind of fell off the bus.
Well, once Piper took the little skirt off of me and I ran and was in my little red bikini underwears, as Pat Patterson would say, hey, he's in his underwears. The bit with Downey and Piper was supposed to essentially be two lines, blow smoke in the face, and Roddy take the fire extinguisher out and blow the fire extinguisher in Downey's face and get the hell out of there. When I left, I'm standing up at the gorilla position with my knees all bloody from taking a bump on the way up. And we're 14 minutes in after I left. And Vince is looking at me, God damn, pal, how long's this going to go? I'm like, I don't know. They should have been gone a long time ago. I don't know what the hell they're doing. But they started verbally sparring with each other, and one trying to one-up the other one. And Roddy taking his sweet-ass time, and Downey not hitting the blowing the smoke cues. And it just got brutal. And then when Piper finally did hit him with the fire extinguisher, and Morton Downey trying to grab Piper's ankles and kept coming. If you watch the video there, you see Roddy going up the aisle. You can see in the background Morton Downey Jr. trying to come up after him. And you kind of half-ass see it, but you'll see like Terry Garvin and maybe Jack Lanza or Rene Goulet or somebody, but they intercept him pretty quick and keep him down by the ring while Piper made his exit. Because we just had a loose cannon. We didn't know what the hell was going to go on. I don't know that Vince really liked that segment that much. But, of course, when Roddy got back after going, 20 minutes heavy, God damn, pal, that was good. Thank you, pal. God damn, good to see you back. Bruce, what the fuck was that? God damn, pal, you got to have more control than that.
Hypothetically, back in 1989, was Brother Love hitting in that dank at WrestleMania 5?
Okay.
It's been a long time, Bruce. It's okay to tell the story.
It's been a long time. It's all good, man. Brother Love had a hell of a run.
You want to move on now?
Let's go ahead and move on, yeah. Brother Love had a hell of a run. Brother, let me say this. I was awake for many, many days, and yeah, it was a hell of a run.
Roll Tide. So let's fast forward. We get to August of 1989, and Roddy has been working house shows leading up to this with a variety of guys. You would often see him working matches with Randy Savage, and always in the main event. That's worth mentioning. But he had worked a series of matches with Randy Savage. He had worked with Ted DiBiase. He's all over the place working on top as a babyface. And now in August of 89, they're going to put him into an angle. And this angle, I don't feel like we ever got a real payoff on, but we'll beat it up. He's programmed with you on the Brother Love show, and he is contending that you have bad breath. So he brings out like floss and toothpaste and mouthwash. And a few minutes later, Bobby Heenan appears long enough to distract Piper. And then Rick Rude shows up and throws mouthwash in his eyes, gives the rude awakening to Piper, and then spits mouthwash at him until several officials come haul him off. And this is leading to a major angle. What are your memories of putting this together and these two guys and their feud?
The memory, here's my memory, that Vince was trying to rib me with the shaving kit that they used. That was Vince's shaving kit. Okay. And so they were trying to rib me with the toothbrush and different things and sticking it and stuff and all kinds of crap. But I don't know what all they had planned, but I do know this, that Piper protected me in that and didn't use any of the stuff that they had gimmicked. So hats off to Roddy for not fucking with me. But it was. Give
me an idea of what they had gimmicked up.
Oh, they'd gimmicked up the toothbrush and.
What was he going to do with that?
I don't know. Shove it up somebody's ass or something. I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know. But Roddy was like going, "Hey man," he goes, "They were fucking with you on this."
Wait. You're skipping over all the good stuff. So let's set the scene. I want to hear what it might have sounded like when Vince calls Roddy into his office, reaches down into his bag, pulls out his shaving kit, and presents to him the idea with what he's supposed to do with Brother Love and this toothbrush. What might that have sounded like?
Goddamn, here's my here. Goddamn, Rob. Here, use my kit. This is my shaving kit. What do we got? We got a toothbrush in here, some shaving cream, some goddamn. Oh yeah, toothpaste. Use the toothpaste and and here's some mouthwash and just stick it up his ass and then shove it in his mouth and then goddamn and then you get this and you put it in his hair, mess his hair all up and smear the toothpaste all over his face, get it in his eyes, just crying now, and then when Rude comes out and you'll take that and you gargle with the mouthwash and right in your face, something like that.
What I like best about that story is sodomizing you with a toothbrush is the appetizer. The payoff is mouthwash in the eyes.
Mouthwash in the eye, yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, Roddy was cool, and he Roddy always took good care of me on that shit. With no sodomy from Hot Rod. Bonus indeed. So, but yeah, it was just to set up the Rick Rude deal.
So let's fast forward. SummerSlam is in 1989, of course, at the Meadowlands. We're going to cover that one day in the future. I'm pretty fired up about it. We've talked about it a little bit here and there. But in this show is where we see Piper make his appearance from the back and Moon, the champ, and Ultimate Warrior becomes the Intercontinental Champion, pinning Rick Rude. So this furthers their feud. But I'm curious, if you've got a talent like Roddy Piper, why don't you put him in a match here?
Don't know.
Doesn't that seem weird in hindsight that Roddy Piper's on the roster, but he's there to moon Rick Rude and nothing else?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all I got. Yeah. I mean, really, it's just one of those, time and place, and what are we going to do? And let's further this story with Rude, but we don't really have a place that Roddy's going to be that's going to make sense.
They continue this angle by having Piper do television tapings where Rude would do his Rude Awakening on a woman, and then Piper would later go to ringside after his match, and he would kiss the same woman, and the woman would faint. So they continue to build to this, and they start working matches around the loop in September, and that's where you start to see the payoffs at house shows. And then we get to I'm not exactly sure when this segment happens. I think it's November. When does the segment happen with you and Piper where he has you with a rope on the Brother Love show?
You know, it's funny. I forget. I don't know. But I remember the segment well. And I
think it aired in November, but I'm not sure when you guys would have taped it.
But I don't even remember what the hell the whole thing behind it was. But I do remember we got back there and it was, okay, Roddy has got to kidnap Brother Love and humiliate him. So we sat there talking of just stupid shit to do and came up with the diaper deal.
How about Topeka, Kansas on Halloween? Does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably right. That's probably right. So we got some big ass Depends diapers, you know, for adult diapers, and they just look like I was wearing white tights. So it didn't really look good.
You like Mr. Wrestling too.
Yeah, basically. So it didn't really work, and Vince had towels in his office, you know, stacked up in his office by the showers. And so I said, it'd be nice if I had like, you know, one of those big old cloth diapers, kind of like Baby Huey.
Uh-huh.
And I took a towel and I put it between my legs. And I said, what if, you know, we did this and we tried to get one of those big ass giant safety pins.
Right.
And they got us one, but they're gimmick, so they don't actually stick through anything. So we couldn't get the damn thing to go through the towel and all this shit. So we decided to do that. And I actually held the towel up, the diaper, with tape. And I took my suspenders, my Brother Love's suspenders, and put them over to hold the towel up so that it would stay up during the segment. and then we took my rose, you know, the lapel rose, and we pinned that to one of the suspenders. We went ahead and put my tie on, messed my hair up a little bit. And we had to go out the match before the segment. They snuck us out so that Roddy could come from behind the set as a surprise. And they covered me up with a giant sheet.
Yeah, you like Casper the Friendly Ghost.
Right. And when we went out, Roddy was under the sheet too until right before the segment. So here you got Roddy Piper and Brother Love underneath a giant sheet, and Roddy's in a dress and Brother Love's in a diaper, and we're just sitting there bullshitting while we're waiting for the match before us to finish so that we can finally get up. And I couldn't see a thing, so I'm tripping on my way up and trying to get up the damn stage. But that one was fun. That was a trip.
How crazy is it too that that's not on the network?
Exactly. What's crazy is they don't have Superstars and Challenge on the network. There was some great stuff on those shows.
Yeah, it was on Superstars, and it's actually on YouTube. It'll probably be down as soon as I mention that, but it's up there if you'd like to see it. And it's a pretty famous photo that a lot of people tweet us all the time of you in the adult diaper. But November 25th is when it aired in 1989. So throw that in your Google machine if you'd like to see Brother Love half naked. I don't know why you want to. Let's fast forward.
Why the hell wouldn't they want to?
Well, if they don't want to see Brother Love half naked and they want to look like Brother Love, they can go to brucepritchard.com. Am I right?
You sure as hell can, because by God, we've got Friday noon's main event there. And that's not a rib, Conrad, because one time I used to be over. But for all your damn t-shirt needs, you can go to brucepritchard.com. We have quite the selection, by God. And do you have any idea what happens, Conrad, after you place your order at brucepritchard.com?
You make money.
Okay. You skip over that part. What do I do?
You spend the money.
I do by calling you and saying thank you.
There you go. I like that. Now, a lot of people think that's a rib, but it's not a rib. But ribbum is a T, not a rib. It's still a T. Ribs still rule. Ribs 24/7. All the ribbon you can handle. I ain't scared of shit. Doot, doot, doot. Ribomania must pose. Well, you know. If I wanted to hook you, you'd be hooked. Pronouns, pal. No yob. I'm fired. And the newly released,
I'm hired.
Don't forget, I'm a Conrad Thompson guy. I'm a Bruce Prichard guy. And of course, just because I love you doesn't mean I like you. Check it out. Go right now and get that chicken salad recipe at brucepritchard.com. And look forward to Bruce giving you a call to thank you. That is not a rib. And it was not a rib that Survivor Series 1989 was a huge success. Thanksgiving night, and of course they're doing some counter programming here, still in their feud, what's left of it with WCW. Jim Crockett Promotions, of course, is gone by this point. But that's the reason Survivor Series was invented. And, of course, in our Roddy Piper match, we've got Rick Rude captaining one team and Roddy Piper on the other side. Typical Roddy passion. Roddy,
easy for you to say.
Typical Roddy fashion. He does not get pinned. He gets counted out. Any memories of Survivor Series 89 and this Rick Rude team, Roddy Piper team? You've got Jimmy Snuka in the match, the Bushwhackers, the Rougeau brothers, Mr. Perfect. It's a star-studded affair.
Yeah, it is. And Roddy really, during that time, he enjoyed it. I'm not sure that Rude and Piper always got along that well.
Why is that?
I think they were very similar in a lot of ways. They both kind of had a chip on their shoulder, and neither one would back down from the other. So they were constantly butting heads. But two great talents, and you're going to have that sometimes.
And on the loop here in the house shows, Piper is not losing. He's winning a lot of matches by pin, but even more by disqualification, count out, stuff like that. But they're doing every sort of gimmick, whether it's lumberjack matches, steel cage matches, every type of match. Do you think you get to a point with an opponent sometimes, Bruce, that you're just sick of that motherfucker? You're just tired of him?
Yes, without a doubt. You get tired of traveling and you walk in the locker room and it's the same faces staring back at you, and you got to go out in the ring and do the same match with the same guy, and it gets old after a while.
So it feels like he starts to kind of stall a little bit in his return. Of course, we talked about him coming back, for WrestleMania 5, and now we're into 1990, and it doesn't feel like a whole lot's happening with him. We've booked him into this feud now with Bad News Brown, which we covered briefly in our WrestleMania 6 episode. But as we start the year, he's still working a ton of matches against Rick Rude. When and why is the decision made to pivot away from Rude and start to look at, hey, what about Bad News?
I just think it's time. Every issue, every angle runs its course. So it was time, and it was time to move on. I know that obviously Bad News was looking for something, Piper being a top guy, and Bad News wanting to work with a top guy. And I don't think that that Roddy was adverse to it. I think he kind of welcomed that challenge and that opportunity to work with Bad News.
And that decision is made in mid-February, or so it would seem, because on February 12th, he's working with Rick Rude, and then the very next day at a Superstars taping on February 13th, he's wrestling Enhancement Talent and challenges Bad News and does a promo about his WrestleMania 6 match. Later in that same show, or I guess that same tour, they were in Tucson on Valentine's Day, February 14th. And this time they have Bad News go ahead and do a promo about Piper. But then when it's Piper's turn to retort and do a promo, he's got his face painted half black. Now, of course, we would see him do this again at WrestleMania 6. And in hindsight, a lot of people would say, maybe not the best look. But I don't know that everybody remembered that he didn't just do it once. He did it multiple times. Do you remember any significant conversation about whether or not that was a good idea?
The conversation was essentially Roddy being Roddy. And that was an idea that Roddy had, that Roddy felt was relevant, and News wasn't against it. So it's kind of goes to the adage, well, he said it was okay.
Right.
So it must be okay. Hindsight and looking at it today, I just think it was in poor taste. You couldn't do that today. Obviously, wouldn't do that today. I would hope not. But I don't know that I certainly didn't know at the time that he was going to do the whole body thing at WrestleMania. And that was something I guess he had discussed with News and something he had discussed with Vince, and they were all cool with it. But, we visited that in the WrestleMania 6 podcast.
Absolutely.
It's available in the archives right now.
Towards the end of February, they do the Main Event 3, the NBC taping. It would ultimately draw a 12.8 rating, and it was at the Joe Louis Arena, which recently held its last WWE event for a Monday Night Raw. And on there, Piper fought Rick Rude to a double DQ in a lumberjack match. This is the one where famously, we've talked about this a little bit several times now, Buster Douglas is involved. But when we fast forward to the next television taping in March, Piper has his face painted half black again. This one's taped March 6th. It would air on March 31st. And we continue to build this feud. And ultimately, WrestleMania 6 comes around. That whole match is in our archives if you'd like to check it out. But let's talk about, when did you know Piper's finishing up? Bad News, as we mentioned, decides, you know what, I'm not happy with my payoff. I'm getting out of here. But Piper's finished up not too long after this, too, at least for a little while. He takes another break. And we kind of touched on it on WrestleMania 6, but he taped a television pilot with Jesse Ventura called Tag Team. And right before WrestleMania, and a lot of people may have missed this, but they did a matinee show in Los Angeles, and the first match was Roddy Piper and Jesse Ventura defeating the Orient-Express. Now, this was never aired on WWF TV. It was strictly done for the television show. Is that something that you guys have to convince Vince to do, or Vince gives it his blessing and thinks this is great for business, I'm going to let him do it?
No, Vince had given him his blessing, and it was something to obviously expand the WWF audience by having Roddy be a part of it. From Roddy and Jesse's standpoint, it was, hey, here's another opportunity for us to be Hollywood stars and get out of the WWF bubble.
Right.
Even though they're playing wrestlers in it.
So Piper takes a couple of weeks off and then starts working house shows again in some of the bigger markets. He does no-show a couple of events, one of which was in Waco. But he's, for the most part, facing Randy Savage around the horn. Kind of talk us through his relationship with Randy Savage, because you didn't see them do a whole lot of stuff on camera, but it seems like those guys would have gotten along really well. Am I right?
Yeah, they did. They were two lost souls that kind of could commiserate together. And my experience was always that they got along pretty well because they were both rebels in their own way also. They both bucked the system. They both liked to speak out. So Roddy and Randy they got along good.
And he's programmed here with Randy because he's filling in for Dusty Rhodes. And his last match for a little while is May 5th, 1990. Do you remember, it was in Tampa, by the way. Do you remember why Roddy took a break in 90?
Tired. He was just simply tired. I think in the back of his mind, really wanted he was really chasing that Hollywood dream and figured that the more that he is wrestling, the further away that he was going to get from that dream. And that's my putting on my psychoanalytical hat. But Roddy felt that, okay, the more I'm doing this, then that's all they're going to see me is as a wrestler.
He does come back in early August 8th. He's in Providence, Rhode Island, but this time he's not in the ring. He's replacing the recently fired Jesse Ventura, and he returns as co-commentator with Vince McMahon. How does that deal come together, and is this something that Roddy is excited to do since he had done it before, and it probably wouldn't involve as much travel? Am I right in guessing that?
Yeah. This was interesting. We needed Roddy, and the decision came down to who can we get to replace Jesse Ventura. Roddy was my immediate suggestion because he would have been new again. I go back to Roddy's 1980 stint, Georgia Championship Wrestling, which I thought was excellent. So I threw out Roddy Piper in that, and I never expected that it was congratulations, pal, he's all yours. So we brought Roddy in, and the idea was I would essentially wrangle and manage Roddy Piper from a managerial standpoint behind the scenes.
Right.
And just, he would only deal with me, didn't have to deal with Vince, didn't have to deal with anybody else on the wrestling side, that I would do all of his television stuff, and we would move on to a career outside of the ring. I go to, Roddy comes in town, and I'm just going to go over and meet with him to, at this point, we were friendly, we knew each other, but I think Roddy still viewed me as that office guy. And there was a trust barrier there. So I went to go meet with Hot Rod at the, I believe it was a Westin Hotel in downtown Stamford off of Summer Street. We're going to go have drinks. We're going to go get a bite to eat and discuss his future. I show up at the hotel, and Roddy's not there. So I call up to the room. He's like, yeah, I was thinking maybe we don't need to go out. And I took the liberty. I ordered a few drinks upstairs, and maybe you come on up here. We can sit and talk in the privacy of the room, So I walk upstairs, and he has a case and a half of Miller Lite on ice. He has a dozen shot glasses with a clear liquid in them. And I forget if we had chicken wings or he had some kind of like chicken wings or chicken fingers or something like that. And I look at it and I'm like, okay. Now I knew Roddy liked to party, and I liked to party. And there were, at the time, there were stories of, Roddy Piper partying, and at the same time, there were kind of stories of Bruce partying. And they would run along the same parallels, but we had never partied together at this point. So I look at the drinks and all that, and I said, well, what's that? Pointing at the shots. And my response was, oh, nothing that'll kill you there, son. Cheers. And proceeded to drink this clear substance that set my lungs on fire every time that I drank it down. But I did all the shots with him. I drank the beer for beer. We might have partaken in a few other party favors after he had visited the old man on the hill. And we just relaxed and got to know each other. And that is where, I point to that one night as where Roddy finally let his guard down with me. And I think he accepted me and saw that, okay, maybe I'm not as big of an asshole as most people think. Laid out what we had in mind for him and just said, hey, you're special. You're not going to have to deal with all the other bullshit. So you'll just deal with me. And that's where it went from there until I was fired the next year. But it was kind of that time frame that we brought Roddy in, and we wanted to use him as a color commentator on Superstars, but also use him on Primetime and on different shows just to get that star power out of him.
He returns to the ring in November working some battle royals, which I assume is, not nearly as taxing. I'm not a wrestler. I don't know. And then works as a special guest referee for a series of matches with the Intercontinental title on the line between the Texas Tornado and Mr. Perfect. How do you think Piper did as a commentator, as a special guest referee, overall? Would you consider this a success, or was this a failed experiment?
As far as the color commentary, I think at this point in Roddy's career, as good as he was when he first started. He had become a lot more selfish. And what I mean by that was, in Roddy's color commentary at this point in his career, he was more about getting Hot Rod over than he was getting the talent over. And as a good color commentator, you want to get talent over first, and in doing that, you get yourself over. So it was challenging sometimes to produce him. Now, if there was, like what we did with him on Primetime as a third co-host, that was a little bit easier because he was a personality, and he was meant to get himself over at that point.
Right.
But on Superstars, it was a chore sometimes to get the best out of him. And he was happy not being on the road all the time.
So we do see him take a pin. This is crazy to discuss this way, but I mean, he did it so infrequently. It's a wrestling challenge taping that happened November 20th in Syracuse, New York. He wrestles Mr. Perfect, and he loses to the Perfect Plex. And then after the bout, Piper shakes the champ's hand. So this seems to be a match he's okay in taking a pin to put over Perfect. Did he just have a lot of respect for Kurt because, you know, he broke in and had his first match with his dad, him as a performer? Was this difficult to try to convince him to do, or is he just jump at the chance because of the heritage? Or kind of tell me how that comes about.
It's funny you bring this up, because the feeling was, is everybody would say when Vince would bring people in, and the first thing he'd want them to do is do a job. To show everybody, you know, Dusty Rhodes come in. All right, Dusty, I need you to put so-and-so over. And the feeling was, well, Vince does that to show people that he's the boss and that, you know, everybody does jobs. And that night, this was a situation where it was to get Perfect over. It was to give Kurt a win over a top guy. And that being Piper. And Piper wasn't full-time on the roster at the time, so we thought that would work and that would really give Kurt a big boost. Roddy's feeling on that was, oh, I get it. Vince Jr. is just trying to show everybody that he's got control of Hot Rod. I don't care. I'll fucking put anybody over. And went out and did it. And his way of putting Perfect over was, you beat me with your finish, and I shake your hand afterwards. And the handshake afterwards was Roddy's call.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
You know, they would work a lot of matches after that, and he would get some wins back eventually. But before Perfect, started to lose, he would lose by disqualification. He would lose by count out, stuff like that. What did he think of Mr. Perfect? I've kind of read the rumor and innuendo would lead you to believe that Perfect was a notorious ribber and that Piper did not like ribbing. Do you recall there being any sort of weirdness there?
Absolutely not. No. Wasn't that Roddy didn't like ribbing. Roddy didn't like to be ribbed.
Well, who does? Yeah.
There's a big difference. Okay. And Kurt and Roddy, no, they always got along. They always got along great. And like you said, Roddy knew his dad, and they had a great relationship. So that was never an issue ever that I ever knew of. But you know, Roddy had his fair share of ribs. So he wasn't immune to pulling a rib on someone now and then.
Leading up to Wrestlemania 7, Virgil is on the verge and then eventually does kind of bow up on Ted DiBiase, and they wrestle at WrestleMania 7. And Piper was the guy on commentary kind of cheering Virgil on, and he appears at WrestleMania 7 and kind of has Virgil's back. What did he think of this pairing? And this is a weird way to ask. Was this done to kind of counteract at the previous WrestleMania where Roddy's out there in half blackface?
Oh, God, no. That's a weird way to ask. No. It was actually to be able to have Roddy in that slot with DiBiase too. It was a way to endorse Virgil, to give Virgil a rub and sprinkle a little Roddy dust on him, but also to be able to have Roddy to slide into that slot with DiBiase as well at any time, where the star power, believe it or not, the star power of Virgil wasn't, all that great at that time. So it was a way to give him a rub, him being Virgil. Pronouns, pal. God damn it.
So let's kind of fast forward. If you remember our WrestleMania 7 episode, which is available now in the archives, you remember that not too long after that, Brother Love was shown the door. And when you came back, it was after SummerSlam 92. Do I have that right?
That is correct.
So we get lots of questions about, why don't you talk about this show? Why don't you talk about that show? Well, he just wasn't there. So that's kind of that. When you come back, I guess.
Well, I will say, during that time that I was gone, that Roddy Piper was one of the few guys that I did still hang out with and spend a lot of time with. As a matter of fact, here's a crazy deal. I was fired in May 1991, right? Something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess. I don't know. I wasn't there.
Why the fuck not? You know everything. And then in August, Piper and I went to Vince's surprise birthday party in Rockefeller Center.
Really?
Yeah. So, me and Roddy were still hanging and talking all the time and just kind of hanging. Yeah, I was still invited to Vince's surprise birthday party 3 months after I was fired. And so I went with Roddy Piper.
So catch me up. When you were gone, we don't talk about this very much, but when you're gone, you went and did some work with Global. And when you're down there, a lot of people would say that you were essentially ripping off Roddy Piper. What say you?
Oh, hell yeah. I stole all the good shit from Roddy Piper. Yes, without a doubt. And it wasn't an intentional ripoff. It's just sometimes I fall into it. Like sometimes I fall into Vince. Sometimes I fall into American Dream Doth and Rose. I do it without thinking about it.
Right. Hashtag it's Miller time. So I know you weren't there, but we should briefly just mention, because people will want to know, what did you think of his match at WrestleMania 8 against Bret Hart?
Thought it was excellent. I thought it was very good, and it was one of the better wrestling matches I'd ever seen Roddy have.
I think you could argue it may be one of his best matches he ever had. And there was some, depending on who you believe, accidental blood there, but I guess we'll cover that for somebody who was actually there. But it's written about in Brett's book if you'd like to check that out. So let's kind of fast forward. When do you remember first discussing Piper coming back? Because he doesn't really do anything when you're back in 92. He doesn't do anything in 1993. And then the next time we see him is 1994. And he ultimately, as many people would remember, would become the referee at Wrestlemania. He'd be the special guest referee for the main event, which was Bret Hart and Yokozuna. And they're back at Madison Square Garden. And, of course, we all remember the first WrestleMania at MSG. Piper was in the main event. Well, here 10 years later, he's there in the main event, too, just not working and wrestling, instead as special guest referee. How do you remember that deal coming together?
Well, we were, again, looking for that outside star power. And I think Roddy just kind of liked taking a couple years off here and there. He would, want to get away from the business and go try out some new things. And it was time for him to come back again and just get back in the mix. And that's what it really turned out to be a lot of times, was he just wanted to get away and get a rest from the business, get away from it for a minute. So it's time to come back. Come home, Hot Rod. And he fit in that role really well. So it's like you're talking about guys that have not been around, that have name value that you could bring in. He was usually at the top of the list. I know he was for me, because I was a fan.
So they anoint Bret Hart as the new guy. WrestleMania 10, they kind of undo the damage that was done at WrestleMania 9. And he's the champ of WrestleMania 10, which we'll cover at another show in the future. But then that summer, we start to think about maybe trying to program Piper with Jerry the King Lawler. And they start a program, I believe, in May of 94. And Jerry Lawler is holding a similar Piper's Pit type segment on Raw called King's Court. And they have a kid come on who impersonates Roddy Piper, dresses just like him. And this leads to a match where these guys are doing promos for several weeks back and forth. And then they have a match at King of the Ring 94. So before we talk about the match, let's talk about the build-up. Whose idea is it to program Lawler and Piper? What did you think of the kid, the promos back and forth, and the whole gaga before the match?
Wow, I want to say that the idea, I think, was mine and Pat's. You had the two of the greatest talkers ever in the business, and they had never crossed paths in Jerry Lawler and Roddy Piper. To me, that was just a natural. A blind man could have booked that. So it just seemed like the thing to do. You had them both. Let's put them in the ring together. Wasn't the greatest, I'll tell you that, but on paper, fantasy booking,
phenomenal.
This is going to be great.
Where did you find
that damn bell rang?
I love when you do that. Where did you find the kid?
The kid was, oh shit, maybe Ohio or something like that. I don't know why that sticks in my head. Maybe, but he was somebody he had sent in a tape. We saw him. It fit. Or maybe Lawler found him. I don't even remember, but I remember seeing the tape of him dressed up like Roddy, doing all the Roddy stuff, and it was just funny as hell. So we showed it to Vince, and he thought, oh, God, wouldn't that be great for him to do that to Roddy? Forgetting that I'd already done that.
Right. So the match, King of the Ring 94, it's the main event. It's Roddy Piper and Jerry the King Lawler. It goes about 12 and a half minutes. Piper wins with a back suplex. Your thoughts on the match? Can you rank it? Can you rate it? I know you don't like star ratings, but let's pretend you're Dave Meltzer.
Yeah, that will never happen. I can't even pretend that. That was in Baltimore, right?
No, it was not.
Where was it?
Baltimore.
That was Baltimore, yeah. No, it was not. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Dave, for that report.
I fucked up, kid. I mean,
you know what? We all fuck up every once in a while, Conrad. It's okay. I'm not going to fucking hold you to the torch, and it's okay. We fuck up. I fuck up all the time.
What the fuck are you talking about the torch? I think we're confused, and we need to get our shit together. One of us may have mesothelioma. Am I right?
Did you know there are billions of dollars set aside for asbestos victims and their families? If you or a loved one has been affected by mesothelioma or an asbestos-related cancer, you can call 855-748-4529 for a free consultation. That's 855-748-4529. Or visit rgtforlaw.com for more information. Robert Taylor, RG Taylor II, PC and Associates, Houston, Texas.
So after King of the Ring 1994, which was indeed in Baltimore, he takes a break and he's gone again.
Wouldn't you after that match?
Well, if you want to know what we're talking about, it is on the network. King of the Ring 1994. Maybe not his best work.
It was a little rough.
So the next time we see Piper, it's 1995. He had a handful of sporadic appearances in January on television, and then he was involved in Wrestlemania 11, albeit briefly. He was introduced as the special guest surprise referee for the Bret Hart Bob Backlund I Quit match. How do you remember that coming about? Just, hey, we need star power, let's call Piper?
Exactly. It was just another one-off, and let's see, Roddy let it be known, hey, I'm out here, I'm available if you got something special. He enjoyed working with Brett, so we thought, okay, this may be a nice little spot for him.
So fast forward, he's done for the rest of 95, and he's on into 1996. We talked about this on our Vader episode, but during a Raw taping in Stockton, California, the Vader makes his Raw debut and destroys Gorilla Monsoon. And then while they're there, that same taping, they introduce Roddy Piper as the new WWF president, and he's going to be replacing Gorilla Monsoon. How does that deal come together? Is that just a way to involve something with him and build to him in Goldust? Do you know that when you start? How does that come about?
Okay, what was the time frame that we brought Roddy back for the presidency to bring back to be the interim?
You brought him back in January of 96, and there's rumor and innuendo out there that originally it was supposed to be Goldust and Razor Ramon at WrestleMania 12, and you had to pivot. So if that wasn't the original plan, what was the original plan for Piper before we got to Goldust?
Well, the original plan. What time is it?
It's Miller time.
The original plan was Goldust and Razor Ramon. The pivot was Roddy Piper. Razor didn't want to work with Goldust.
Right.
He was uncomfortable working with Goldust and had major issues doing anything with Goldust. So we thought, okay, what else can we do? Now, in the meantime, there was this other celebrity, we'll call him a celebrity, out there in the world who was red hot in many, many ways.
Marilyn Manson?
No. We did talk to Marilyn Manson, though, at one point. No. Keep coming. Come on.
I don't know.
He's got initials.
Everybody does.
Yeah. But he went by his initials.
I don't know.
It's a favorite fruit of Florida.
Oh, O.J. Simpson. Okay.
O.J. Simpson had been cleared on all charges and found not guilty in the murder of his ex-wife. And there was a sentiment in the country that he needed to get what was coming to him. He needed some comeuppance.
Are you about to tell me that the original plan was O.J. Simpson to have a segment where Piper gave him the what for at WrestleMania and there was a pivot?
No.
Okay.
The original plan was for O.J. Simpson to have a match at WrestleMania.
Oh, my.
Against the Hot Rod.
This is real.
This is real. And I remember calling Roddy and pitching Roddy the idea, which he was for. We had preliminary talks with O.J. Simpson's people who, at that point, they were looking for anything that had a paycheck attached to it. We floated the idea out there. We did talk to O.J.'s people. I talked to Piper about it. Piper was on board. We were bringing him back in to get involved in everything. And if you remember, and if you go back in the early time of Piper's reemergence, he does make comments about O.J. Simpson. And he makes comments about, right and wrong in America and what's going on, and that he's here to make things right in the WWF. The end game to that was going to be the one-off and have Piper beat the shit out of O.J. Simpson at WrestleMania in Anaheim, California.
Right.
Once that started getting out beyond the inner circle of O.J. Simpson's people and out in Hollywood, the backlash was deafening. People were, if you do this, you'll never have another sponsor. Just extremely, extremely negative. So we punted and said, thank you, but no thank you, OJ. We're not interested. They thought, and we thought that also in the end game, OJ getting the shit kicked out of him would satisfy some people.
Nope.
And as those words come out of my mouth, you realize how ridiculous that is today. But you always have to try something on.
I can't.
Even if it sounds ridiculous, but it's like, well, goddamn, Piper's going to beat the shit out of him in the fourth match on the card. Everyone will be happy then. And then you sit back and you put yourself in the Goldman's position, and you put yourself in Nicole Brown Simpson's family's position of saying, fuck that. Short of being dead or in prison, nothing's going to satisfy anybody.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because right now I really want to ask you to be Vince McMahon and play through that, but part of me is like, ugh, let's just move on.
Yeah, it was distasteful then. It's distasteful now. But we did a lot of distasteful things sometimes. And, we do on this show, but weekly.
Damn it, there are lines. That's a line. We're not doing that one.
Goddamn, pal.
Don't tease me.
Pronouns.
When you know what? Fuck it. Sing the song.
Spend my days working hard on the go, but the hands on the clock keep spinning too slow. I can't wait to be alone with my baby tonight.
Tell you what, that'll fix your mood right there.
Goddamn right it would. Man, it makes me tingly all over every time those melodic melodies come out my mouth.
I'm gonna move along. When does Razor start to raise a stink about working with Goldust? February?
January, February, yeah. Right in that area. We went to Bangor, Maine to actually shoot the angle at a house show. And Razor just didn't want to do it. He was uncomfortable doing it. And did it half-assed. So the thought was, you know what? His heart's not in it. He doesn't want to do it. He's not going to do it well. So let's move on. Let's find someone that does want to do it. Because Goldust was red hot at the time.
Bangor, Maine is January 13th, 1996. On that show, we had Goldust working Henry O. Godwin, and we had Razor Ramon working Hunter Hearst Helmsley. So there you go. There's your frame of reference for when it happened. So kind of talk us through how the pitch goes down for Roddy. Hey, pal, we don't have OJ. No, by the way, what did Piper think of OJ? I mean, you know what I mean. I mean, the idea of working a match. Let me be clear. I'm going to frame that right.
Well, the idea was he wanted to beat the shit out of him.
Well, yeah,
that's
of course.
A shoot. I mean, that's a shoot. Roddy wanted to beat the shit out of him. So the pitch, and by the way, the pitch always was, OJ, you're going to get the shit beat out of you. But you'll make a lot of money off of it. And Piper's pitch, not pit, was, I'm going to beat the shit out of him. So he was fine with that. He was fine with that part. But it never, he didn't get past the conversation stages, and we moved on. After Razor didn't want to do the match with Goldust, and we had it laid out to go all the way through WrestleMania 12, said, okay, well, we'll find somebody that does. But we were looking for something that would be a little bit different rather than just a straight match. So I said that with a straight face, a straight match, with Goldust.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, So, and by the way, that wasn't a rip. We started kicking around some different ideas about what we could do with them and how that match could be different. They, being Goldust, was associated with Hollywood and the gold and the Oscar statue and all that nonsense. And Piper was, Mr. Hollywood, having done movies and being a Hollywood star, so we could position him that. And I think it was Vince's idea to, what if we did, a backlot brawl? What if we went to a backlot in Hollywood and just had a fight with all the props and and all the accoutrements that you're afforded on a Hollywood lot. And then from there, the immediate kickback was this, well, shit, then they don't have a match in front of the people. He's, no, goddamn, pal. They start on the back lot, and then they get to the arena. Finish the match in the arena. So as we start talking about all this shit, that, okay, we do this Backlot Brawl, we shoot it in Hollywood, and then the match ends up in the ring in Anaheim, and we start just throwing out, which is always dangerous when Vince is involved, you start throwing out goofy ideas.
Right.
So what if Goldust takes off in his gold Cadillac and Piper follows him? And we do like the OJ chase, because that was still fresh in everyone's mind. The white Bronco going down the freeway there in California, in LA. And it was pretty much a similar route. And we start laughing. Oh my God, what if we got the rights, or we got that footage? We just used that footage of the white Bronco. We put Piper in a white Bronco, and Roddy comes down and follows Goldust all the way to the arena.
Right.
So that was the framework of the whole deal. And we shot the Backlot Brawl a week in advance, a week ahead of WrestleMania. We got Mitch Ackerman, for any of you Hollywood types out there. Mitch Ackerman is a producer with Walt Disney, done a lot of things, but Mitch was always backstage, and he was a friend that would enable us to do shit. And Larry Burton, which Jerry Lawler will like. But we set up a Backlot Brawl. We set up a studio in Hollywood to have this fight. And we brought in different Hollywood people to kind of be around, and they would be our audience of the Backlot Brawl. So if you remember, I think we started inside, and then we got out to the driveway in between with the fire hose, and Goldust had his Cadillac. But we didn't know what the weather was going to be, so we had this is how crazy shit was. We had the fire hose. You know why the fire hose was there?
Because you had to wet everything down in case it was raining that day at WrestleMania, and it would look consistent.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
And we had people. You could actually see me in a couple of shots up on top of the roof when they pan across and see people up there watching. But it was absolutely crazy, because if you know Roddy's whole thing, especially with Hollywood folks, when he did his wrestling stuff, that was real. And you don't fuck with his wrestling. You don't make fun of him. You don't call him a fake. You don't say what he does is a work or anything else. So Roddy and Goldust are beating the living shit out of each other.
For real.
For real. They're not stuntmen. It wasn't a gimmick car. Sure as hell wasn't a gimmick fire hose.
He really hit him. He really jumped on the hood.
He really hit him and really jumped on the hood. He really peeled out of the parking lot and hit two Lexus on the way out that were some producers of a Fuller House, or I don't know. It was a sitcom that was taping in a studio across the way. And when Goldust came out around the corner, his car swung out and hit two Lexuses. That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of explaining to do.
Any heat on Dustin for that?
There was a lot of heat on us for that. That's for damn sure. Yeah, the studio was not happy with us at all.
I meant Vince.
I'm sorry, what, from Vince to Goldust?
Yeah.
No, man, it made it look real. He loved it.
Okay.
So they do it, and in the midst of this battle, Piper broke his wrist. It was a good break too, but he kept going. So you see at the end of the fight where Roddy's kind of holding, I think it was his right wrist, and he had a broken wrist, probably a broken arm too, but the wrist was the really bad break. And they get in the cars and they take off. Well, that night we had to go. Me, Vince, and Roddy spent couple hours in the ER there in L.A., in Hollywood, getting Roddy x-rays and getting the cast put on his wrist and all that good shit. But then we had to go, a week later and have the end of the match in Anaheim. So as we get to Anaheim, we've got the white Bronco that Roddy took off on and the gold Cadillac that Goldust had. So we have there in Anaheim, there's a ramp in the back that comes down. There's a guard shack there. And the idea was Goldust obviously enters first and Roddy comes behind. Well, Roddy had in his head that he wanted to wreck the Cadillac. He wanted to ram the Cadillac. And Vince was like, no fucking way. No, we're not going to do that. You're not a stunt guy. I don't want you getting hurt any worse than you already are. And we're not doing that. So Roddy and Goldust decide amongst themselves that when Goldust gets in, we're doing this live, by the way, with not Stuntman, with two wrestlers.
You're saying live, you mean live to tape?
No. I'm saying live.
Okay.
Live.
Okay.
So they're coming down, and we've got everything clear. And Roddy and Goldust decide amongst themselves that, okay, we're not going to wreck the car. But Roddy told Goldust when he gets out to leave his car door open. And Roddy wanted to come behind it and take the door off. Ram into the door.
Yeah.
Well, Goldust tries to leave the door open, but it still went halfway shut, and Roddy didn't get the shot that he wanted. But the other thing you'll notice is because when we left the Backlot Brawl, where Roddy broke his hand and his wrist, and then they get to the arena, Roddy can't go out and work with his wrist the way it is. He's got to tape it up. So you see Roddy grab tape on the way in and start taping up his wrist.
Right.
To go to the ring and get all that done, and they had their stuff, and that's where we stripped Goldust down, and he was wearing the women's lingerie. But getting to that point, oh, my God, it was just a nightmare. When you think back and you go back from Razor and Goldust, that was going to be a big blow-off there, to Roddy and Goldust do something special, the Backlot Brawl, and all the bullshit that went into it, having to have – and one of the deals that was made on the Backlot Brawl was that we had to put Jeff Connolly, the guy from Grease, Hickey from Kanicki, famous actor. He was also in Taxi. That he had to have a cameo in the Backlot Brawl. So it was basically Roddy saying, "Hey, how you doing there, buddy? Good to see ya." And that was his cameo in the Backlot Brawl. A little bit of trivia.
Chat me up about the build for the Goldust thing, because you guys did some kind of interesting stuff with him at the time. You had him asking to blow on Piper's bagpipe, and you had him on the a makeshift Piper's Pit, and he talked about how he had an eruption watching this. Lots of double entendre, lots of sexual innuendo, since everybody says we use that word inappropriately here on the show. Was Piper for all of this? He got it. Why was he game for it when maybe Razor wasn't?
Roddy liked money.
Well, Roddy liked money so much that I bet he would be down to be paid to endorse First Family Mortgage. And, of course, if you go to 1fmc.com, you can save some money for yourself. What might that sound like if Roddy Piper was the official spokesperson for First Family Mortgage and 1fmc.com?
Well, son, he would probably tell you that not only will they save you money now, they're going to save you money in the long term. And you know what else, Conrad? You don't need perfect credit. No, son. Even if you don't have perfect credit, 1FMC.com can save you money, Bubba.
NMLS number 65084, equal housing lender. Just when you think you've got the answers, First Family changes the questions. Do you need perfect credit? Nope. Do you need money out of your pocket? Nope. Do you need some debt you want to get rid of? Absolutely. 1FMC.com, or give us a call now, 888-425-0105. So when it's all said and done, Wrestlemania 12 here Goldust, Roddy Piper, Vince McMahon, everybody's pleased with the way this turns out?
Yeah, pretty much. Vince gave Roddy the Bronco after the fact, gave it to him as a gift, had it shipped to his house.
That's kind of fun.
Yeah, so Roddy got to keep the Bronco. It was all good. So I don't know if Goldust got the gold caddy or not. He might have.
So the next time we would see Piper would be in WCW. He debuted after Halloween Havoc in 1996. It was in Vegas. Macho Man had just faced Hulk Hogan in the main event. And then Piper comes in, cuts a promo about being the icon, and you've never been able to beat me, blah, blah, blah. And they're kind of off to the races. But Piper talked about on the DVD that the WWE put out that the night before, Vince called and asked him to induct Jimmy Superfly Snuka into the Hall of Fame. Kind of carry me through how that comes about, because clearly he knew. He just wanted to have the conversation, or what?
Clearly who knew? Roddy?
Clearly Piper. Clearly Vince knew.
Vince knew that Piper was going?
Okay.
No, he didn't.
I feel like
I'm sorry, I'm confused. Pronouns, pal. You're saying that Vince knew Piper was going to WCW? No, he didn't. Okay. No, he didn't. And I don't think that it was Vince that called him. I'm pretty sure it was me.
Piper tells the story on his DVD that the day before, Vince calls and says, got an idea. How great, we're putting Jimmy Snuka in the Hall of Fame. I want you to put him in. How great would it be for you to be the guy to put him in? And Piper says he can't. And Vince says, I know, just tell me you love me. And that is supposedly the way that conversation goes, according to Roddy Piper. And you're saying, no, that was a rib, and it was actually Brother Love calling.
No, I'm saying that conversation may have happened because I had a conversation with Roddy the day before as well. Not just about inducting Snuka, but coming back in general. The conversation, Roddy told me that he would think about it and that he would get back to me. Now, Vince may have called him after that and had that very conversation with him, either sensing or Vince may have known. I did not know the day before. I didn't know until Roddy went out that Roddy was at WCW. And I spoke to him the day before. So Vince may have heard it and just made a last-ditch effort to call him personally and say, hey, pal. But I had a conversation with him as well.
And?
No, that was it. That was it. He told me he would get back to me.
And that was the end.
That was the end. And it hurt me because I felt that we were at a place where he could have told me
right
what he was doing, and it would have been cool. But I also understood after the fact because I called him on it. I said, you could have told me. I mean, what would it have changed?
Right.
And he said, he goes, if you would have known, then you and Vince would have made a harder play, and I didn't want to put you in that position of knowing, which in that moment, I told him I thought that was a bullshit excuse, but it is what it is.
So
that one hurt me.
He has a run with WCW. There's some high points. There's some low points. But that's not what this show's about. It's about Bruce's experience. So we'll kind of move along. But one of the things I want to ask you about before we get back to Piper's return in 2003 is he had a brief appearance with TNA back when they were in Nashville, and he cut some somewhat controversial promos. Do you recall those and what the reaction may have been?
I recall it was like the first or second show that they had where Roddy went out and basically called out Vince Russo and blamed Russo for Owen.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just thought it was in horribly bad taste on all fronts.
Did you talk to Piper about that? Was that a Russo idea? Did he go into business for himself? How did that come about?
I talked to Roddy about it after the fact, years after the fact. And Roddy told me that Roddy went into business for himself and that no one knew he was going to do that. And that when Russo came out, that Piper wanted to slap the shit out of him. So I don't know. I don't know who's zooming who in that. If that was work. Knowing Russo, it's a swerve, bro. But who knows? I don't know. Knowing Roddy with a live mic, I could see Roddy doing that.
So let's talk about how he comes back. He comes back in 2003, and he makes a surprise return at WrestleMania 19. And this is during the Hulk Hogan Vince McMahon match. He pulls out a pipe. It looks like he's going to attack Vince, but of course, swerve. He attacks Hulk Hogan. How does that appearance come about? It feels like this is almost a theme. Well, WrestleMania's here. Let's see if we can get Piper.
We were in Seattle, as you stated. We're talking about the match, and as usual, Bruce brings up, "Hey, what about Piper?" Now, when you look back at the talent that had history with Vince and that love-hate relationships, you got Hulk and Vince, and then you've got right on the heels of that is Piper and Vince. Piper had been away for a while, and Roddy hadn't been making much noise at that time and was sitting in his ranch out in outside of Portland. I knew it was driving distance. I pitched Vince. I said, what if we got Piper involved somehow? And it was Vince's call to do the swerve and to have Roddy. It was my call for him to come out, Piper be a surprise for Hogan.
Right.
And do something to Vince. It was Vince's call to do the swerve and have him actually turn on Hogan and be on Vince's side. Nobody will call that, pal. So I picked up the phone and called Roddy. Hey, what you doing? And he wasn't doing shit. So I said, well, we're in Seattle this weekend. Yeah, what you got? I pitched him. We had him drive down. This deal was made on Friday night. Yeah, on Friday night is when we came up with it. I called him that Friday night. He drove down on Saturday. I met him on the loading dock. I snuck him up the elevator in the hotel, put him in my brother's room, and then got Tom another room. And we kept Roddy there. I think that's what we did. I know Tom helped me get him up there. And then had Roddy just show up. That day, we got him in the building. Everybody thought that he was just there to do an appearance. An old-timer doing an appearance at WrestleMania, signing autographs. No one gave it a second thought. And Roddy's sitting in the dressing room getting dressed with everybody, and, hey, how you doing? How you doing? All this shit. And when it came time for the match, we put him in a big overcoat, trench coat. I walked him out when the match started, and we stood right underneath the hard camera section in the middle of the floor. There was the big stadium there in Seattle, and they had a big stand where they had a camera. And we just stood right inside the barrier there. And when it came time, we walked down to the ring. I had my credentials, and I just kept moving people out of the way. He got right down there to the barricade. They hit the cue. Roddy threw off the trench coat and was in the ring. Nobody knew. Jim Ross was a little upset because Jim was in charge of talent relations at the time, and Vince didn't tell him. I didn't tell him.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm serious.
Wow.
He wasn't happy. Oh, damn, what's the deal with Piper? What are we fucking paying him? What are we doing? Oh, I just got him here. We didn't discuss a deal. We didn't discuss anything. It was a one-off. Hey, Roddy, you want to be involved in the match? Come on down. We'll get you in the match. And
you guys just worked the money out later.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, that's the way the old timers did it.
How about that? So let's talk about his relationship with Hulk Hogan, because he's been pretty open, and at different times, so is Hogan, that they did not have the best relationship. And a lot of it was them just, both having some animosity for the other about gunning to be the top guy in the mid-'80s. And everybody wanted that top spot. And they kind of argued on mic and then allegedly behind the scenes about who made who and who was the bigger star. And would Hogan have been as big a star if he didn't have a foil, if he didn't have a heel, if he didn't have someone as an antagonist to make that character bigger? So how were they to do business together? I know you weren't there in the 80s, but was any of that present in 2003, or were they good to go by then?
They were good to go by then, but there was still that underlying animosity. You still felt that beneath the surface, there were little digs here and there. Professional jealousy, I'll call it. But they worked well together. And by that time, they were, in the twilight of their career, let's say, and realized that these other younger guys were doing their thing and moving on up. So, let's show them how it's done, and we can do this together.
Yeah, Piper had always been the top guy when he came to New York. He did big business in Charlotte, but he was the man in Portland and Georgia, and he probably thought he should be the man in New York. And, of course, it was a babyface territory, and Piper was a heel, so it kind of worked out the way it did. But he would even write and talk about he felt like he had paid his dues. Meanwhile, Hogan got his spot because of a guest starring role in Rocky III, and he didn't think there was any comparison between the two as to who deserved the spot. Do you remember him espousing any of that to you, or was that all just put on for angles?
I could see Roddy somewhat believing that, but I disagree with that wholeheartedly because Hogan did pay his dues.
Sure.
But I think Roddy knew that Hogan paid his dues. I think every old timer feels that they paid more dues than anybody else. No matter how you view it, you're always going to look at, well, they didn't have to eat the shit I had to eat. You didn't go out and wrestle for $15. So you always feel that the guys that come after you, well, they didn't pay their dues.
So the next week, we're in Chicago for a television taping, this time with SmackDown. And Piper is back on WWE TV after a 14-year absence. And Vince McMahon is going to be the guest on Piper's Pit. And this segment would involve Rikishi coming down, and he's got a coconut in his hand. And they're trying to, of course, do a throwback to the Jimmy Snuka situation. And this is where we're introduced to Sean O'Hare and him being kind of under the tutelage of Piper, with Piper smashing the coconut over Rikishi's head. But somewhere in here, Vince can't help but make some sort of comment about the shape that Piper's in. Piper's fresh off of surgery and is a little heavier than normally he may have been on television. And Piper has commented that he didn't really know that was coming or appreciate it. Did you guys talk about that? What was it like backstage?
No, we didn't talk about it. That was simply Vince going into business for himself, and no different than what Roddy probably would have done in the same situation, given the same material to work with.
Right.
So, and the fact that Roddy was a heel in this situation, also, you could make the argument, man, it's fair game on a heel.
Right. Whose idea was it to put Roddy with Sean O'Hare? How did they get along? Why didn't it have a bigger run than it did? Because they're setting up, obviously, here, with future segments where Jimmy Snuka even makes a surprise appearance. Sean O'Hare in one side, Rikishi in the other, and, of course, Piper being the second for O'Hare. It feels like an odd pairing. Would you agree?
Yes. We were looking for a mouthpiece for Sean O'Hare. We felt that Sean O'Hare had a great look and had some talent, but he was missing that intangible, and thought that Roddy as a mouthpiece for O'Hare might give him that boost that he needed. So kind of challenged the Hot Rod. Say, hey, can you get this kid over? And that's where it kind of ended. It just, it didn't do that well.
The next pay-per-view that we all remember is Backlash 03, and that is in Worcester, Massachusetts. I'm getting it right. And Sean O'Hare in one corner is taking on Rikishi in the other, and Sean gets the pin. And somewhere in here, Rikishi smashes the coconut over Piper's head. So there's a little payback 20 some odd years later. And not too long after that, a couple of days later, we see the SmackDown taping. And this time we've got the debut of Mr. America as a guest on Piper's Pit. I can't wait to talk about Mr. America and Hulk Hogan's run here for 02, 03. I know we'll do that at some time in the future. But does this not just feel like kind of nothing new, nothing original? If we've got Piper still doing coconut stuff and still doing stuff with Hogan, were there any long-term plans here or not so much?
Well, there were long-term plans with Hogan. Again, we'll get to that in the Hogan episode, so I won't go into that. The idea behind it was to use Roddy to try and get O'Hare over. Also, we had Zach Gowen kind of in the mix with some of those things. That it was try to use some of the older talent to uplift some of the younger talent. We didn't have anybody that could stand alone. It was a brand split that was on SmackDown, and it was tough. It was just really tough. So you had to utilize some older name talent to be able to put this new talent up on a pedestal. And that was the idea behind using Roddy and Hulk, even at that time. But we wanted to get the Hulk Vince story out there and kind of done with. We thought there was still a little money in that.
There's just so much going on here. May of 03, it's Judgment Day. They're in Charlotte. Mr. America with Zach Gowen, the one-legged wrestler, is taking on Roddy Piper with Sean O'Hare. And Mr. America gets the win after about 5 minutes. And this happens when O'Hare accidentally hits Piper in the head with a lead pipe. Vince McMahon had come down and distracted the referee, and that's what kind of allowed it all to happen. So you've got an aging Piper, Hulk Hogan under a hood, a one-legged wrestler, Sean O'Hare, Vince McMahon, and a lead pipe. This is the same match. Who the fuck booked this shit?
Okay, next question.
Is that your idea?
Yeah, I was writing all that shit during that time. It was a rough time. That was me. It was challenging, man. It was challenging, but I take 100%. Sure, I'll take the credit and the accusation. Yeah, that was me.
Wow.
I'm gonna back down from it. It sucked. It did. It sucked. But I knew where I wanted to go, and you have to go through a sucky period to get to your ultimate destination. I didn't anticipate what was still yet to come. There were storm clouds ahead, my friend.
So, at a SmackDown taping, Sean O'Hare defeats Mr. America by countout when Vince McMahon comes out and has Zach Gowen arrested for his actions at Judgment Day. And the deal here is Mr. America would have to undergo a lie detector test the following week to see if he was really Hulk Hogan. And if Hogan wins, Piper is going to be fired from the WWE. We keep going. There's more of this.
Dark times, my friend. Dark times.
Process this. Sean O'Hare on SmackDown beat Chris Benoit after a kick to the back of the head. But afterwards, Benoit uses the crippler crossface on Piper. So this took it a little bit of heat for him. Zach Gowen is on a Piper's Pit in June on SmackDown where Vince McMahon challenges him to an arm wrestling match for a WWE contract.
Sounds fair.
This starts to feel, I don't know. This is not a great year for WWE. Am I right?
We've had better.
In San Antonio, they did a SmackDown on the 200th episode. Sean O'Haire pinned Eddie Guerrero. So far, he's beat Chris Benoit and now Eddie Guerrero. And
hey, and you bitch, why didn't you do anything with Sean O'Haire? We did. We tried. He beat Benoit and Guerrero, but fuck, it was horrible.
Eddie was being seconded by Tajiri, and Piper sprays Tajiri in the eyes with tequila on the floor.
Okay.
Here we go. We're getting to the finish here.
Is this just pick on Bruce Day today? What the fuck?
SmackDown
Hey,
at
man, I didn't. They all weren't winners, Conrad. Okay.
SmackDown at MSG. We've got Eddie Guerrero and Tajiri, the tag champs, taking on Roddy Piper and Sean O'Haire. Guerrero gets the pin over Piper with a frog splash after Tajiri sprayed green mist into Piper's eyes. And this would be Piper's last appearance for a while. And let's talk about why that is. Now, there's lots of rumor and innuendo out there that around this time, he goes on HBO and does a segment on wrestlers dying. And if you haven't seen that, it's worth going out of your way to see. He is not in a good place at the time, but it is riveting television. And I know that you have seen it, and I know that you've probably talked to Roddy about it. But it would ultimately be the end of him in WWE in 2003, and he's not there at all in 2004. He comes back and makes, 24 appearances in 2005. Catch me up. How does this come about?
Well, when Roddy came back, he did tell us, kind of once we were into everything, he says, hey, I did an interview with HBO. HBO was doing this documentary, and they asked me, and the theme was wrestlers dying and drugs in wrestling, and I did an interview. He told us about it ahead of time, but he also kind of downplayed it a little bit.
Right.
That it wasn't, I protected the business, and it's me and the fact that I'm a heel, and I never thought I'd be back, and it should be fine. Then it aired. And Vince didn't think it was fine. He was hot about the comments. But I think, here's how I found out about it. I was home here in Houston. It was a Thursday night. We had finished TV. We had everything written, ready to go for the next week. I get a call. Call Steph. I called Steph and went right to voicemail.
Are you saying Steph, your wife, or Steph McMahon?
Stephanie McMahon.
Okay.
So I get another message, and the message was something along the lines of Piper's out, Hogan's out, we got to rewrite everything for TV. So what the hell's going on? I call Vince. Now, I called Steph a couple times. She didn't answer the phone. I called Vince, and I said, hey, I got a message from Stephanie about Hogan and Piper being out. What's going on? I fired Roddy Piper, and Hogan quit. And I'll tell you the rest of the story on the Hulk Hogan episode whenever we do that at some point. There's a part 2 to that Hogan comment. But my initial reaction was, what the fuck? Back to the drawing board. Get your team together and rewrite SmackDown. Talk to you tomorrow. Click. And that's exactly what I did. I went and had an ice cold Miller Lite.
What'd you think of the comments when you saw it?
No worse than what anybody else said or did. Unfortunately, the timing of it, Roddy was prominent on our TV and was bad-mouthing, just bashing the shit out of the company and the business in general. So it didn't air well, especially at the time. It just didn't look good, didn't sound good, and put the company in a bad light. I thought it put Roddy in a bad light.
Did you talk to Roddy about doing it ever after the fact?
Yeah, I called him when I hung up with Vince. I said, what the hell? He says, hey, man. He goes, I told you guys. And I said, but Roddy, I said, shit. You also made it sound like it wasn't that big of a deal. He said, well, I didn't think it was, but I'm sorry, and I understand. And, essentially, we'll see you down the road.
So he understood that he had fucked it up.
He did, yeah, he did. And I think he knew that beforehand, but he wanted to get what he could get out of it.
Yeah, I get that.
So,
but he was remorseful, at least what you remember.
He was remorseful to me, yes.
Maybe not to Vince, the way you're saying that?
Yeah, I don't know if he was that remorseful to Vince or not. It's, again, their relationship was...
How would you categorize that? Love, hate?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, Piper made a lot of money because of Vince McMahon. But when I say that, I know if Piper were here, he would say, McMahon made a lot of money because of me.
Exactly. They both did. They needed each other. And one wouldn't be, the same without the other.
They both just wanted to be the one with the leverage and the more dominant one in the relationship. Is that fair to say?
All the time. All day long.
It's exhausting.
Twice on Sunday.
It's exhausting, is it not?
Yeah, because I was usually the one in the middle of them.
Yeah. And Piper admits that he was difficult to do business with here. And, he kind of understood that he was being let go. But Piper says, even on the WWE documentary, that he found out he was being let go online. Nobody called and told him. You buy that?
No, because Vince called him and told him. And I talked to him right after Vince told me that he had talked to Roddy.
He just wanted to babyface himself there, you think?
Yeah.
That's a shame.
It is, but that's he didn't know any different. He was fighting for himself, and he was fighting for his character, and he was fighting for Roddy Piper. So he had to keep that image going, and he had to do what he needed to do and say what he needed to say to protect himself.
Well, it seems like going on HBO and motherfucking the company is not enough to get blackballed. I think you have to pull a gun on some writers and have a #1 podcast to do that. He didn't do quite enough to be blackballed. So he's put in the Hall of Fame in 2005. Are you in the room when that idea is first kind of pitched? It's announced in February of 2005 that, hey, we're putting Piper in the Hall of Fame. Is everybody on board with that, or does somebody still have it in their crawl about this HBO shit?
I think everybody was on board for it. He deserved it.
Sure.
It's time. You got to let bygones be bygones at some point. You just can't hold grudges forever. And people make mistakes and fuck up. So move on.
Wrestlemania 21. This is one of the more famous Roddy Piper skits of this time. We have Stone Cold Steve Austin being a guest on Piper's Pit. They slap each other, drink some beers. Carlito comes down, attacks both guys. Eventually, everybody gets a stunner and lots of beer, and they recognize everybody who went in the Hall of Fame in 2005 at that show. Hulk Hogan, Roddy Piper, Iron Sheik, Nikolai Volkov, Bob Orton Jr., Paul Orndorff, and Jimmy Hart. So, essentially, WrestleMania 1 goes in at 2005. What was the feeling about the segment here? Your memories of the segment? Was Steve excited to work with Piper? Was Piper excited to work with Steve? Did this go according to plan? The last time we heard about a Piper's Pit at WrestleMania, shit went off the rails. How was it here?
No, everything was easy, and I think everybody was happy to do it, and it turned out great. It's a good, happy, feel-good moment. You get to see everybody, and you get to see everybody kind of how you remember them.
Right.
So, no harm, no foul. It's all good, and it's nice to have those guys in the Hall of Fame at that point.
Piper's back working as guest referees on SmackDown in May of 2005. He's doing it on house shows, too, with JBL in the main event. Not a lot, but a little bit. And he comes back and is seconding Chris Jericho, as Jericho would take on Muhammad Hassan, who I cannot wait for us to talk about on this show sometime. And this is happening on Raw at this time. So most recently, we had seen him on SmackDown. This time, he's over on the Raw side. and he is kind of playing the second a lot. I think they're just really trying to find spots to get him on TV, because he is always opposing his son, but sometimes seconding Shawn Michaels. Is the thought here, let's just look out for our buddy and get him a payday, or is it, in Vince's mind, is he still considered a draw at this point in 2005?
He was still a nostalgia act, and he was still somewhat of a draw, but I think that overall, for Roddy, from my vantage point, I wanted to work him into whatever we could, because I loved working with Roddy, and I felt he deserved it. And there were a lot of old timers that we would do things for that hadn't contributed as much as Piper. So I was happy to do it.
He's used mostly through the rest of 05 to help build other folks. They did a segment over the summer where Bischoff was involved and Jericho was involved and Carlito's involved and lots of stuff going on. Eventually he takes a super kick. He being Roddy Piper. He has Mick Foley on his Piper's Pit segment. Randy Orton and Bob Orton interrupt him. That sets up a show or a match on SmackDown where Piper defeats Randy Orton and Bob Orton Jr. in a handicap match, which is pretty fun in 2005 for what it is. And he kind of fluctuates around here in a lot of mixed tags and such. He had some matches on SmackDown where he was a part of a team with Eddie Guerrero and Batista taking on King Kennedy, Randy, and Bob Orton. He has Batista and Simon Dean on the Piper's Pit segment, and that happens right after a 10-bell salute for Eddie Guerrero. They do some more stuff with Batista and Simon Dean, but that kind of finishes up 05. But 06 is really where we get to the end of Roddy Piper as an in-ring performer, and he's tagging with, who would have guessed it, one of his real-life better friends dating all the way back to the Mid-Atlantic days, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. How does this come about? It feels like every time I've asked you a story like this, you take credit for it, babyface the fuck out of yourself, and say, I said, hey, what about Piper? So tell me that you did that here, too.
Well, I'm a fucking genius, Conrad, so get over it. No, this was actually something, and I think this may have been either Brian Gewirtz or Ed Koski's idea to put the two together into legends, put them out there, and then as things happen, whoa, fuck, would have made them tag team champions. I'm not saying that was his idea, but it might have been a situation like that before you knew it, we had Roddy Piper and Ric Flair as our tag team champions. I remember going overseas with them as tag team champions and Piper getting hurt, and his kidneys were just one side all black and blue and swollen and in a horrible way. He needed to get back to the States, but instead he said, "Nah, I'll go back commercial. I'll be fine, man. I just need a couple beers. I'll be good." Which was just his way, So he's all ballooned up, and the doctor is telling him he needs to go to the emergency room, and he's just worried about getting a couple of cold beers in him, and he'll be fine. But that was the work ethic of Piper, and it was a nostalgia act for a little while, having Flair and Piper in that role, and it was fun. So milk it while you can.
Yeah, and it happens on Cyber Sunday is when they win the tag titles, and they being Ric Flair and Roddy Piper, had both been having matches with different members of the Spirit Squad, and oddly enough, Piper tagged with the Highlanders once. I guess they just said, well, they've all got kilts, fuck it, put them together.
There you go.
It's kind of an 06.
He's got a kilt, maybe, and help those kids out. Good God.
Show them how to get over in a kilt, right? Goddamn.
Well, you know what? Those guys used to wear a kilt to the building, and they wore them in real life all the time, and that just got over with Triple H and Vince. They loved that. But then they went and saw TNA on their off at WrestleMania and got fired. So, I
can't wait to talk about that. But, who knows when we're going to talk about the Highlanders again. They went to a TNA show and got fucking fired because of it?
at WrestleMania in Orlando. Yeah, one of them took his son to Universal Studios, and TNA was recording their shows at Universal Studios, so they went in to see the recording. And while they were there, somebody spotted them, and TNA put them on camera. And, oh, hey, you can't go to a TNA show. You're fired. Something like that.
Did he know they were putting him on camera?
No. He had no clue. He's just there as
a wrestling
going to
fan
Universal
with his
Studios.
kid.
Yeah, he was just there, coming in like everybody else does to get out of the heat.
Wow. Does Johnny make the call, or is Vince fired up about that?
Oh, you can't go to a TNA show. You need to go home. That's pretty much it.
That may be my new favorite impression.
Which one, Conrad?
Tell everybody who you're doing. There's some... Shuley, who's listening right now, has no idea who you're doing.
Johnny Ace. Did you see how good Vince's arms looked yesterday? Oh, my God. That one vein almost made my vein pop out, if you know what I mean.
It took us a while.
I got the one-legged wrestler. He's really good. He's a lot older than you guys said. And it doesn't even look like he's missing a leg. He walks around like you and me.
It's my favorite.
Is that a new haircut, Vince?
Oh, my God.
What?
I'm trying to get it together. November 2006.
That was a good year, Conrad.
Ric Flair and Roddy Piper beat the Spirit Squad to win the tag titles. Does it get more nostalgia pop than this to have Flair and Piper win the belts and then the next night on Raw beat Randy Orton and Edge? I mean, that's crazy stuff, is it not?
You think people will believe that?
If we put it on TV, goddamn, they'll believe it. Seeing is believing, pal.
What if they came down on skateboards? Cowabunga, dude.
Oh my, you're really getting into a special area here. Survivor Series 06, Ric Flair, Ron Simmons, Dusty Rhodes, and Sergeant Slaughter are taking on the Spirit Squad. Tell everybody why Ron is in for Roddy.
Fuck if I know. Why was he? You know, or you wouldn't have asked the question.
Because he was just diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Oh, God, yeah. I thought that was later.
And
but, it sucked.
In December, Lillian Garcia announces on Raw that he had been diagnosed, and they were dedicating the match to him, and the Highlanders wore Hot Rod T-shirts for the match. And you would see the Highlanders continue to dedicate their match to Roddy Piper for the rest of 06. So it was a tough time, man, for Roddy. And, I know he did more stuff in 9, 10, 11, and 12, but he didn't do anything in 7 and 8. He took a break from the business. And I want to know what your relationship was like with him during this time. How was he doing? How often did you guys touch base? Just give me something about Piper when he kind of goes fade to black on us for 07 and 08.
Well, it was a rough time, and it was a rough time for him because he just didn't know. And Roddy is the kind of guy that always had control over his surroundings, or he liked to be in control, or at least think he had control. And this was something he had no control over. And we did talk a lot during this time because, as I've stated before, my wife fights the same battle. So he had a lot of questions, and there was just so much unknown. I tried to get him to come to Houston, go to MD Anderson. He was comfortable with his doctors. He just didn't want to upset his life. He didn't want to sell for the disease.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He was willing to do whatever it took to get through it, but he hated selling, and he hated the fact that he had to change some shit in his life.
Right.
So more than anything during that time when we would talk, it was more of a hang in there, pal. It gets better. But he didn't want anybody to see him. He felt that if he was going to be less than, he wanted people to remember him at his best times, not when he was in a fight in that way, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a shitty time for him, and it was just a tough time for him. But he made a comeback, and he beat it, and he made a comeback.
He certainly did make a comeback because it feels like we've told this story before. When it was time for Wrestlemania 25 in 2009, it's Wrestlemania season. Let's get Piper on the horn. Now, let's get in our Wayback Machine. I guess it's not that far back now. Mickey Rourke had filmed the movie The Wrestler, and it was getting all sorts of award buzz. And so somebody has the idea to involve him in an angle, and we will cover that at some time in the future, I'm sure, just in passing on a Love to Know or whatever. But at this point, Bruce was gone from the WWE. But I'm sure you talked to Roddy about working with Mickey. He did lots of TV to lead up to it, and he had a match at WrestleMania against Chris Jericho with some other legends. Do you think he enjoyed being in that spot? Did he enjoy working with Mickey and Jericho, or was he kind of against this? Because he's been pretty public in the past that he didn't think celebrities had a role in, being in matches and involved. He didn't like Arquette being champ in WCW. He didn't like Snooki or Kevin Federline or any of these guys being GMs for Raw. He didn't like celebrities being in the Hall of Fame. So he kind of had a chip on his shoulder. What say you? Did you guys talk about that WrestleMania match?
We did after the fact. It was an opportunity because Mickey Rourke wasn't working in the match.
Right.
He didn't mind that. And that was a rub for him because Mickey Rourke was red hot at the time, coming off of The Wrestler and coming off of the Academy Awards. So it was an opportunity for Roddy to hobnob with a top Hollywood celebrity. I think he liked that. I think he liked that part of it. But the funny thing about that was before the movie The Wrestler came out, Vince wanted nothing to do with it and didn't want anybody to see it, didn't want anybody talking about it, and in no way, shape, or form would he allow them to advertise on the show or anything else. He hated it. And fast forward a few months, changed his tune after he saw the popularity of the movie.
So let's talk about, since you weren't there for any more of the WWE stuff, let's kind of move along to other stuff, so to speak. There's a lot of weirdness around Roddy Piper, and I just want to kind of clear up some of the rumor and innuendo. It's out there that he used to travel a lot with Johnny Fairplay, and Johnny Fairplay was famous for being on the reality show on CBS Survivor. He's a big wrestling fan and probably listens to this show. How did his relationship come about with Johnny Fairplay? It seems kind of random.
Well, Roddy always liked to have someone with him to kind of carry his bags and help him get from place to place. And that was Johnny's role. Johnny was his assistant to make sure that all of his travel arrangements were taken care of and get him from place to place to drive and do all of those things. I don't know how that relationship came to be, but it was an odd one at best. I think Johnny Fairplay even named his daughter Piper. But, Roddy just always had somebody with him. Always had somebody to take care of everything for him. And that was just his way. So Johnny Fairplay was just an assistant for Roddy for I think it was maybe about a year, maybe 2 years, max.
And then they had a crazy car accident where these guys were injured. Apparently, Fairplay would say that they were at a bar or a nightclub or something and got loaded, and things got crazy. Piper was going to cause problems, and he managed to get Piper out of there. But because they're both fucked up, they're in a serious car accident where both guys were hurt. And Piper starts to say that, Fairplay tried to kill him, and just kind of goes a little nuts for a little bit. He also did Wife Swap with Ric Flair, and that was on ABC not too terribly long before he passed away. And he had been pretty good friends with Rick on and off, I guess. I mean, I guess the whole way through, but, in the wrestling business, you're close with, who you're around a lot. And to the point where one of Rick's grandkids is named Piper. So, I mean, they obviously thought a lot of each other. Do you remember him discussing with you the idea that this wife swap thing may be another foot into the door to some more mainstream stuff? Because I know you guys were close at that point.
Roddy just looked at it as it's an ABC Walt Disney property.
Right.
And he's got friends there. It was a way to get out into mainstream. Again, it was just another mainstream hit. He had a lot of different things that he was doing. And any time that he could get in the mainstream, he was game for it. He wanted to do it. The interesting thing to me was that Kitty agreed to do it, because for so many years, Roddy had maintained keeping his personal life personal and private. He didn't like, and Kitty didn't like, to my knowledge, really being in the forefront and being a part of any of that. So that was always a strange and kind of funny thing to me, that he would put her in that position and that she would allow herself to do something like that. So, but it was just an ends to a means to an ends. Get some publicity and get his name back out there and stay relevant.
If nothing else, Piper was always kind of viewed as being fiercely loyal. And there's rumor and innuendo out there that he didn't really like any promoter, but he thought a lot of Don Owen. And he kind of would refuse to work main events or headline for the WWF when he was in Don's Portland territory. Fact or fiction?
No, that was a fact. Roddy wouldn't do it, and Vince respected that and honored that. So Roddy never worked against the opposition against Don Owens, and also Roddy didn't work Portland for Vince until Don had passed away. And in that time, I believe Roddy actually worked a show or two for Don Owens while he was still under contract for WWE.
Wow, that's cool.
But yeah, Roddy was very loyal and loved Don Owens.
We can't get out of here without talking about the controversy of Kevin Nash. And I know you weren't there, but they had a match in 1997. It was a part of a big tag match. I think it was like Kevin Green and Ric Flair tagging with Roddy Piper on one side, Hall, Nash, and Six on the other side. Apparently, both sides had an idea of the way the match would go. They get out there. There was a miscommunication. People did not want to work with each other. They get to the back, and depending on who you believe, Nash and Piper went nose to nose and nearly got physical. And Piper would make a big stink of about this on his podcast before he passed away. And so something that hadn't been talked about for, 17 years is now being discussed again. Did you guys talk about this? Was he just working an angle? Was he trying to create some internet buzz? Or was he really half hot about this before he passed away?
I never talked to him about it. I pretty much know just the rumor and innuendo about it, but the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle between both guys' stories, as it usually does. So I really don't know. I never heard Roddy's side of it, and I don't know that I've ever heard Kevin's side of it.
Real quick, we got to address it. Piper kind of went into business for himself and created a podcast angle of sorts where he blamed Steve Austin for being fired from Podcast One. But in reality, Piper had quit. And lots of people have been tweeting me about this week, but Austin addressed it himself on his podcast and to others that he never had anything to do with this. Allegedly, Austin was upset that Will Sasso had been on Piper's podcast doing Steve Austin impressions, but that wasn't the case. Austin was not upset. He didn't pitch a fit to Podcast One. He didn't get Piper fired. Piper wanted to quit and do his own thing and move his show to SoundCloud. But in the process, Austin kind of got some heel heat from fans because allegedly Piper went into business for himself here, just knowing, hey, Austin is the big man in podcast land. Let me stir up some controversy and work an angle. And then, of course, he passed away. But do you remember discussing with him this Austin Podcast One craziness? Because he would even go so far as to say, WWE even fired me from my Legends contract, which was also not true, at least from what I know. What say you?
Well, I know that he was not fired from his Legends contract. That I know, and I know that from him. He told me he never signed it. So I don't know, but I doubt that would happen. As far as the podcast thing, Roddy told me his story. So again, it's somewhere in the middle. Knowing Roddy, knowing Steve Austin, I don't believe in a million years that Steve would be as petty as to do something like that. And to my knowledge, Roddy and Steve were always friends and always friendly. And I've talked to Steve about it too. And Steve was like, no, that never happened. It had something to do with Will Sasso, as you said, doing a lot of imitations and having Jim Duggan on and not telling Duggan that it was Will Sasso. Will Sasso stayed in character as Steve Austin for the entirety of the show, and then they let Duggan in at the end of it. So here's what I do know. I do know that prior to that taking place, that Roddy was looking to go to, what is it, SoundCloud?
Yeah.
He was looking to move his podcast and do his own thing. I do know that he did the deal, and then, all this other hoopla came up. So probably I would err on the side that Hot Rod probably used it as an opportunity to plug the shit out of his show. And, hey, here's where you can find him. They left me over here because I did this.
Yeah.
And create controversy.
Sure.
Because for the life of me, I can't see Steve Austin.
No.
I just can't see him do that. Now, I could see Steve Austin getting pissed off and calling Roddy and saying, hey, what the fuck, man? Or, hey, what the fuck, man? Goddamn, kid. Oh, we're good. What the fuck you done? But I can't see Steve going around the A to get to the T and costing somebody their job, especially somebody like Roddy Piper. I think that just knowing Steve Austin, as long as I've known him, he's a stand-up guy and he's an in-your-face guy, and you know where you stand with him. So I think that, that was maybe just something that Hot Rod created to get some buzz.
Well, towards the end of his life, he started to think about other things to do, and he was doing a podcast, of course, and he had a comedian on his show, and he was friendly with Will Sasso, and he was starting to do some one-man shows, and you and Roddy had kind of talked about, his visions of maybe not exactly being a stand-up comedian, but sort of, kind of being a stand-up comedian and doing these kind of one-man show concepts. Curious through what the plans were and how all of that was supposed to go down before it didn't.
I really, how do I say this? I tried to prepare myself for this, really and truly did. I tried to be cold here. Roddy, dear friend of mine, and I love him to death, absolutely love him to death. And the last time I saw him, I had my daughter with me, and we had dinner. We got together and we talked about things for the future. We had an idea that we were going to do a 2-man show and go on the road. We had dates booked in Texas. We had 5 dates booked in Texas that we were going to do a promotion with Rocket Fizz. And we were working on that. From there, we were going to basically get the bugs out here. And then we had 6 or 7 dates in the UK. So we were just going back and forth on what we could do and so on and so forth. Last time like I said, last time I saw him, I did his podcast. I don't even know if that ever aired, but he even put my daughter on the air and interviewed her for part of the podcast, which was really cool. Sorry. Fuck me, man. Sorry, I can't.
We're not in a rush, dude.
I'm sitting there looking at the picture in the book. Where'd I leave off? Doing the show.
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking, just going back and forth, and I was in Rockport, Texas. I was at a friend of mine's, and I get a message at night, and it missed call. My phone never rang, and all of a sudden, how like your phone kind of shoots up, missed call, and a message, and it was Roddy Piper. So I tried to get the message, and it wouldn't retrieve it because of the area I was in. We went home, and I was at his house there in Rockport, a friend of mine's, and my phone rings the next day. It's another friend of mine, and he says, "Hey, man, how you doing?" I'm like, "Hey, everything's good. I'm down here in Rockport." And he says, "Some shit about Piper." And I'm thinking, oh, fuck, what did he do now? Because Roddy had just been on TMZ for some outburst or something he had done. And I said, oh, fuck, what did he do now? He says, oh, my God, you don't know. I said, what? And he said, man, he's gone. And it there's some guys, and there's sometimes when you hear that, you go, okay, I expected, I knew it was going to come, and you become callous in this business. You really fucking do. And I remember I was in a room full of people, and I met eyes with my wife, and she just knew something was wrong. And I walked out, and I went down to the water. And I immediately tried to listen to my message from the night before, and I couldn't fucking get it. And I called. I kept calling Roddy's number, and it kept going to voicemail. And I went in, and I checked my phone, and I saw the TMZ deal. And right about that time, I called my buddy at TMZ. And I asked him, so what the fuck happened? And he told me that, he passed. So I hang up with the guy from TMZ, and I just try one more time to listen to that fucking message, and I get the message. And it was Roddy, and he says, "Hey, you know, I just called. I just got in. I've been on the road. I was up in Canada, and I just came home. Not feeling real good. I think I'm going to go to bed. Just called to talk to you and tell you I love you, and I'll talk to you tomorrow." That was it. And he was gone. And I reached out, you know, to Colt and Kitty and everything. And Colt got back with me and says, "Hey, you know, you were the last person he called." And always just kind of, I don't know, man. He died of natural causes, man. He had a heart attack in his sleep and just passed. But it just, you know, it eats me up that I missed that call. And just fucked up. But, you know, I talked to Cole afterwards, and I helped them with the book, so they could help, so they could finish the book that he had been working on. And, you know, that was it. But that one, man, they're like I said, you become calloused, which I'm not proud of. And fucking Roddy hit me, and it hit me hard. Especially because, you know, last time we were together in person and just, you know, we talked about life and death and health. And it just sucked. But, yeah, that's the story, man. And I miss him to this day. He was a big influence in my life. He was a big influence in my career. This sums him up in some ways. When he met my wife for the first time, and he looks at her and says, "Oh, what do you need there? You need some towels? You need a toaster? What do you need? What can I get you?" That was Roddy. He was always thinking about everybody else and what can he do for you. And that's the guy that I choose to remember. That's the guy that I love. He was really good to me. He was really good to my brother. He was the guy that I called when my dad was in intensive care for 18 days straight. That sumbitch talked me down off the cliff more times than you could ever imagine. And that was my friend Roddy Piper. So there you go. Love him.
Piper passed away on July 31st, 2015 in Hollywood, California, which is where he had a home at the time. His death certificate said that it was due to cardiopulmonary arrest caused by hypertension, and it listed a pulmonary embolism as a contributing factor. TMZ reported this all as a heart attack. He has 4 children and 4 grandchildren, and he's one of the rare cases who was married since 1982 to Kitty. He died a month after Dusty Rhodes. It was a bad month in wrestling. And
I broke the news of Dusty to Roddy.
I was at the Mid-Atlantic Fan Fest in Charlotte when the news broke, and of course it spread like wildfire there, and I was the person who told Rick, and he thought I was ribbing him, and he got half hot and said, "Don't fuck around," because no one could believe that this had happened to Roddy Piper. In his HBO Real Sports interview we talked about earlier from 2003, he talked about the fact that he had to go back to the WWE that year because he couldn't access his pension fund until he was 65 years old. And he said, I'm not going to make 65. When he passed away, he was 61.
Yeah, we used to joke we wouldn't make 30. So we both got to beat the odds.
Well, man, I don't want to finish on a downer here. I know we can't tell the story without talking about the end.
Yeah, you know what, man? But I'm sorry. I swear to God, I prepared for this. I prepared that I was going to tell the story and all that good stuff. But let's end with that sumbitch influenced so many people in the business. And he, without Roddy Piper, I don't know if there would have been a Brother Love. I don't know if there would have been a Brother Love show. I don't know if a guy like, I'll even throw Bret Hart out there, would have been able to make it size-wise in the business. Because Roddy broke every barrier put in front of him. He did change the rules. He made the rules, and then he broke the rules. And he was a pioneer that will never, ever, ever be duplicated, because they definitely broke the mold when they made Roddy Piper. So he, man, there's just so many positive things, and people tend to dwell on the negative, and you know, we did a lot of things, man. We did a lot of drugs. We drank a lot of booze. So I remember pussyfooting around that, talking to his son Colt when they were going through the book, and he says, Bruce, he goes, my dad went over all that with us. He's told us everything. And I was like, okay, cool, you know. And I've had the talk with my kids. Hey, your dad used to party. I don't anymore, but there was a time, and Roddy had done the same thing. So yeah, we ran, we ran in some fun circles. You know, couldn't do it today, wouldn't do it today. But at the end, like the night we were sitting there having dinner with my daughter at Irma's in Houston, and he looked at me and goes, man, he goes, have a beer. He goes, he had quit drinking. And he goes, I hate it when my friends don't drink around me because I feel like it's my fault. And I just laughed. I said, no, I actually just don't want one right now, but it's good to know I can. But he had cleaned up quite a bit there at the end, and was living life to survive. His daughters, had gotten married. He was so friggin' proud. And, those grandkids, he was like, last time I saw him, I just looked at him and just kept calling him Grandpa for the rest of the weekend, because he was showing me pictures of his grandkids and shit and being proud Papa. So, but that's the guy that everybody should remember and know that the motherfucker lived 100 lifetimes. I mean, man, most people wouldn't be able to survive the life that Roddy Piper lived. 10 people might not have been able to survive the life that Roddy Piper lived. He lived it to the fullest, man, and nobody can touch him. So let me challenge you, if you're listening right now, to go out of your way to check out a few things. First of all, Rowdy's book. It's called Rowdy, the Roddy Piper Story, and it's by Ariel Toombs and Colt Toombs. Colt is his son, who is trying to make a name for himself in the wrestling business, and if you want to keep up with him, you should certainly follow him on Twitter. He is at Colt Toombs. Toombs is spelled Toombs, at Colt Toombs, colttoombs.com. You can also keep up with him there. But pick up the book. Go out of your way to check it out. If you haven't seen the movie They Live, it's worth a look. And I think it's on Netflix. It's on one of those online delivery services. I've watched it there recently. And you should probably check out, just for the sake of this show, the WrestleMania 5 segment with Brother Love. And I would encourage you to check out WrestleMania 8, his match against Bret Hart. If you still want a little more Roddy Piper, his Hall of Fame speech from 2005 is available on the network, I believe.
and once upon a time was, and I'm positive that Legends House is there. And Piper is one of the stars there, and I encourage everyone to go out of your way to kind of binge on some Roddy Piper and celebrate the memory. In the UFC, he had a little more life with Ronda Rousey, who called herself Rowdy Ronda Rousey, with permission. Judo Jean LaBelle was the common person there who kind of lined that up. And I'm sure we'll do lots more about Roddy Piper. I'm sure there's lots more great stories that we can share. But this feels like an appropriate place to wind it down. Roddy did lots of movies and guest appearances too. If you just want to cruise over and check out his IMDb, it's pages and pages and pages worth. Anything else that you'd like to mention before we end our Roddy Piper episode today, Bruce?
No, I'm sorry for being a downer at the end, but hey, it is what it is, and Piper's a man. He was a man, that's for damn sure.
Well, let's get into it. We want to go ahead and hear from you. Hit us up on Twitter. I am at Hey, it's Conrad. He is at Bruce Prichard. You can vote on our poll at Prichard Show, and we want to tell you what next week's topics are right now. I'm going to go first, Bruce. We're cruising right through WrestleMania season. I'm going to say poll topic number 1 is WrestleMania 10. Roddy Piper was back in the main event. It's Madison Square Garden. Of course, we've covered a lot of Bret Hart on this show, and we've covered some Lex Luger on this show. Well, now let's talk about when it was supposed to happen, what really happened, what did happen at WrestleMania 10. What might we talk about if WrestleMania 10 wins, Bruce?
Well, we got to talk about Burt Reynolds cussing me out in a locker room full of people.
All
We're
right.
going to talk about that and everything that you just said. You know, the rumor and innuendo surrounding the main event, what people thought was going to happen with Lex Luger and what actually did and why.
Poll topic number 2. Bruce, you want another pick, or is it back to me?
Yeah, you know what? You just go ahead and take it from here. You do pretty good on these.
Let's keep it going, man. Let's binge. It's WrestleMania season. We're getting close. WrestleMania 11. It's been on the poll once before, but we're bringing it back. We're going to make it a WrestleMania poll for you. In the main event, is it Shawn Michaels? Is it Kevin Nash? Is it Jenny McCarthy? Is it Pamela Anderson? Or is it really Lawrence Taylor and Bam Bam Bigelow? The first time that a celebrity, a non-athlete, so to speak, or a non-wrestler at least, was involved in the main event in quite a while for WrestleMania. It's Bam Bam Bigelow and Lawrence Taylor. What might we talk about if WrestleMania 11 wins, Bruce?
Well, we're going to talk about the fun surrounding all of the other NFL players that were involved in that match and getting all of that together leading up to it in the first time Steve McMichael's entrance into the world of professional wrestling, not to mention some great stories about Pamela Anderson leading up to her involvement there as well.
Roddy Piper was the special guest referee, as a reminder there, of Bob Backlund and Bret Hart. He was also involved in poll topic number 3, WrestleMania 12. We've talked all about this one, and we've never actually circled in to the main event. The boyhood dream comes true on our all WrestleMania poll. WrestleMania 12, headlined with the Iron Man match. Bret the Hitman Hart against the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels. Lots of stuff was supposed to happen there that didn't. O.J. Simpson, Scott Hall, and Goldust. What might we talk about if WrestleMania 12 wins, Bruce?
We'll talk about what everybody was talking about, that Bruce was finally going to get buried in a couple days. No, that's not what they're talking about. No, it was also the behind-the-scenes maneuvering with Diesel, which it was his last WrestleMania and him wrestling The Undertaker, and the negotiations that went on that day before that match and the big stink that was caused leading up to that.
Last but certainly not least, poll topic number 4. You can probably guess where I'm going with this one. WrestleMania 13. To me, this is one of the things that kind of jumpstarts the Attitude Era. I've talked about that I really feel like it was probably Royal Rumble 97, but it was starting to get into full speed ahead at WrestleMania 13. Maybe one of my favorite matches ever, Stone Cold Steve Austin taking on Bret Hart in an I Quit match. And then in the main event, Shawn Michaels is not there. He's pulled up lame. So we've got The Undertaker challenging Psycho Sid for the world title. What might we talk about if WrestleMania 13 wins, Bruce?
Well, it was one of the craziest, but I think for me, one of the things leading up to that was the negotiations with Ken Shamrock and Ken Shamrock's involvement. Of course, he refereed the Stone Cold Steve Austin Bret Hart match. And that was some crazy times with some behind-the-scenes maneuvering that I think some people will find very interesting.
So let's recap. It's an all WrestleMania poll. It's WrestleMania season, baby. Let's get to it. WrestleMania 10, WrestleMania 11, WrestleMania 12, and WrestleMania 13. Which WrestleMania do you want to hear about next Friday right here on Something to Wrestle With? Bruce Prichard. Go vote right now at Prichard Show on Twitter. We'll see you next week.